were shooting in Flinders Lane once, and we'd gone around a corner with the whole crew, and we left a PA in Flinders Lane watching over the gear because we were shooting down this other sort of side street. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, this guy's getting jumped for whatever he's got left on him, but he didn't have any gear on him. I'm like, who's chasing him? And I'm like, who? What are you talking about? Who's chasing you? And he goes, Iron Maiden. And I'm like, what? What are you fucking talking about? Oh my God. Why are they chasing you? I took their vodka. They had this setup backstage where it was this massive sort of food and drink and everything. But in the middle of it, they had this ice sculpture. And there's this bottle of really expensive vodka in the ice sculpture. Oh my God. And he nabbed that and run.
Oh my God.
And they're chasing me. I'm like, I don't know you.
Yeah. Delete number.
I have no idea who you are.
Beings.
The introduction. This guy was just walking past and he just asked us about the equipment. Turns out he really likes movies, so we wanted him to have a chat.
We chatted with him for like an hour before we started recording. I said, "Oh, you like movies too?
You like movies? Oh, you actually work in the industry? Oh, that's interesting.
That
that's
actually happened to me once here when I was doing my degree. We were doing an ad for who was it? It was Beyond Blue or somebody. We're doing a TV ad, and a guy, we'd been here. It would have been like an 8 o'clock on a Thursday night or something, and a guy walked past, and we were like, oh, this guy's probably security or something. But we wanted to focus group the ad that we just cut, and we grabbed him. And we were like, oh, can we steal you for like 5 minutes? And he's like, yeah, no worries. He walks us in and he watches it and he gives us all his feedback. And we're like, you're really good at feedback. He goes, yeah, I work in the film department here. And I'm like, oh, fuck's sake.
That's a great convenience.
Yeah. Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. But just you wouldn't have picked it. Like he didn't look like a lecturer. He looked like just a security guard or something. And we're like, oh, this guy's probably just an average fella. And no, he had a lot to say about the ad.
That's great.
It was very funny.
And did that happen to you? Like when you're walking past and someone just like, hey, like you want to come in for an interview, and then suddenly they talked about something that you are really interested in, and then you suddenly, oh, this guy is a bit of an expert in this field.
No, it's never happened to me before. Wow. But film guys aren't. We're recluses. We don't usually. Okay. We stick to the dark edit suites. That's what we slept here when I was doing the film degree here. We would sleep here. We'd sleep in the edit suites overnight and everything like that. We'd bring blankets and yeah. So we started a production company out of here that did a whole bunch of like music videos to start with. I would record. I remember. I worked every weekend for like 2 years or something. I'd record sports, games, whatever I could do, weddings, whatever I could get my hands on to shoot. So it was just recording all the time. And then we'd come, because we were all poor. So we would come here and edit. So we'd edit our stuff for the course, but we'd edit all this other material as well. So we'd book the room, and I remember recording for the VBL, the Victorian Basketball League, and we record for them every weekend and cut them packages, and you just want to get time in front of the desk, because that's all you're really doing. Because I remember really early on someone saying to us, like, you're not going to make anything good or write anything good for like 10 years. So just grind it out, cut your teeth and all this stuff, because you're not going to make there's a really good talk by Ira Glass, where he talks about your craft won't catch up to your taste for a while. You'll notice what's bad, but you won't know how to fix it. You have to catch up to the craft, and most people don't get that. They wonder why their student films look bad. You're like you know it's bad, but you don't know how to fix it using the craft. So just cut your teeth, get the numbers done. Put in the hours, and then you can produce.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you see that change? Like when you are
I still haven't seen it. It still hasn't happened. Yeah. I'm waiting for it.
It's going to kick in soon.
It'll happen. When did it start to happen? Depends on the material. So when you're doing doco stuff, especially when you're doing music stuff, music videos, you can get away with a lot of shit. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the best of, and you can be very emotive, and you can play with the equipment, and you can play with the composition and all this sort of stuff. You can play with the narrative because there's a low bar for entry. So that's why I think you have that progression. You go through that, like, I'm going to, you start off, you make a couple of shorts. I made far too many shorts. And then you go, okay, I want to take someone else's idea and someone else's want and desire, and I want to sort of be the craftsman to turn it into something and produce it. So you stop making your own stuff and you start making other people's stuff, and you start with a low barrier for entry. So you go, okay, I'm going to make a music video for somebody for free, and and they talk about what they want, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, are the demands pretty big for like a music video? Like,
Depends
compared
on the
to
musician.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, would it be more local stuff when you started it?
Yeah,
like it was just going
it's
out,
mates
reaching
of
out.
mates.
It's you got a band or you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, oh, we'll love to do.
You're probably hanging around with those fellas anyway. You're pissing up with them on a Thursday night when no one's going in on a Friday for your degree.
I did have a musician friend, and he'd always say, "Oh, I want to try to do like a small video," and he'd like get like small little actions or small recordings and do it himself. But he loved doing it all by himself. But he was a perfectionist though, so I don't know if he would let someone else do it. Yeah, but
you do run into that quite a bit. And I'd say 1 out of 10 maybe you run into an artist where they're so specific on what they want that you're like, okay, you become almost secondary. You're not even the director or the writer for it. You're just helping them produce their idea.
Yeah.
And they're not really inviting you into the process.
Yeah, because that's like a different skill in itself, right? Because that's what I was like, trying to get someone else's idea when they're like firmly in control as well, when you don't have any say. It's like quite a different experience, I would imagine.
And I think that's the testament to a professional. So I generally, when I'm working with anybody in the industry, there's this really dramatic line where, are you making it for you and are you making your idea, or are you making for somebody else? And do you know how to execute someone else's idea, and can you be that professional? It's like saying, oh, you build your own house and you take 10 years and you get it exactly what you want, but now build mine. It's not an easy transition, because you develop a different sense of hearing and you develop a different sense of understanding the idea. Because in the idea in your head, you can't even sort of elucidate the idea to most people. That's half the game when it comes to production with film, is can you get everyone on the same page? That's why they do so much development work for it. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to show you what it sounds like. I'm going to show you what it feels like, because I'm just trying to get you in my head, especially the director. All the other departments are trying to get in the director's head, and you're trying to get the director out of his head. Or their head. You're trying to bring them out, because that's a huge problem. You see it a lot you don't see it so much in student stuff, because they're not even there yet.
They don't understand that. Probably don't understand how it works at that point. They're kind of all just putting it all out there, right?
Yeah, and it's that mid-tier one where they're journeymen, and you're still trying to. They're probably proficient at it. They're probably proficient at directing. They know the language, but also to get them into a space where you can develop the entirety of it and it's very cohesive. That's a different skill altogether.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed about like new filmmakers, new directors, and student makers, they pretty much try to make what they want. Like even though they got an assignment from the schools, like, we want you to make a short film about the school, for example.
Yeah.
But in their heads, it's like, I want to make a horror
without
at the school. Yeah. And so, what would be your advice for the students who want to transition into the professional industry?
Recognize that you're not going to make 99.9% of the time. You're not making what you want to make. If you really want to be a commercial director, if that's the space you want to move into, because it's not all the same. Not all directors are making the same thing. They're not all wanting to make the same thing. Recognize that you're working with other people, and that's going to be the hardest part. The creative part's the fun part. That's where you get to muck around and do what you want. But trying to get it to a proficient stage of execution is really, really tough. It's really, really tough, because that's where you still see it now on huge budget productions. They still fall short. They still fall short on execution, because again, it's that cohesive between the inside and the outside, the interior and the exterior. Can you get it from your head to the page, and then the page to somebody else?
Do you know what puts in play there, even for like big studio films? Do you know like what really like gets in their way with like communicating with each other? Because that's usually the biggest problem, right? Everyone understanding, being on the same page.
Yeah, the biggest issue
big
at the
money and
moment.
they don't even
Yeah.
get there, right?
The biggest issue I hear at the moment is there's too many cooks in the room. And there's far too many producers having a say over the piece, where previously there wouldn't have been that many. And they also knew their role. The producer isn't there to do too much creative work. They're not. That's what their job isn't. That their job is to ensure the project comes to fruition. And they hire all the department heads and they bring them in and say, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this, and they oversee it. But they don't. There's too many creative producers.
Yeah.
Where we want to put this in there. We want to put that in there, and
Everyone's got their own idea, and they want it to be in, right?
Without a doubt. And they're piggybacking the professionals. They're piggybacking the writers and the director and that sort of thing, where they're like, we need this.
So one of the big questions is like, if you have a director and then you have a producer, whose movie is it going to be?
Who picks up the Academy Award for Best Film at the end of the Academy Awards? The last category is Best Film, and who grabs the award?
Definitely the director.
No.
Oh, the producers.
The producers pick it up.
Okay.
Because the producers are the ones that are usually quarterbacking the entire project. That's the job is ensure the projects comes to fruition. That's their job title. The director gets hired by the producer usually. Because the producer's like, I want to make this. And they go, I want this writer and I want this director and I want this editor. Maybe not the editor. And then they trickle down. So the director will often say, I want this DOP, or the producer could say it. But again, the producer ensures the project. That's why they pick up the award. If it fails, it's not the director's fault.
Okay.
It's the producer's fault.
So what's the pipeline look? So does the producer like have a script or an idea, or does someone
Could be
come to
anything.
them? Like someone's like, hey, I've got
could be
this
anything.
idea.
Yeah.
So there's like multiple ways. It's not like the
Oh,
producer's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
here's, I've got a script. I want this director. I want,
It could even be that they want to make something around this. And it could even be even further than I got commissioned to write a script for an actor who was producing the piece because he wanted a vehicle for himself in this space. So he didn't even he gave me completely different parameters. He was like, I want it to be, it wasn't even a genre. He just I want it to be a two-hander, 2 locations, this budget. He gave me the draftsman version of it and said, this is what I want. And then I can go develop any idea around those parameters.
wow.
That's kind of good creatively at least. Like it gives you a little bit of room
Yeah,
to work
he's
with,
like,
right?
you can be whatever you want it about, but I've got to be. And then there's the caveats. I want to be in every scene.
I'm the
I've got to be
focus.
every
Sounds like
scene.
The Rock's recipe, like he has a team of writers, and he said, write a script where I always win and I'm the hero.
Yeah,
And I'm in some shorts. I'm in my like grey or green shirt.
I don't want to have to wear a shirt at any point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want my
Character
arms
doesn't have
to be
any
out.
hair.
The guy's bald, but he's sexy, so
Yeah.
that's got to be
Yeah,
it. Yeah, you get that. Yeah. So that could be the impetus for the project is I need a vehicle. It's got to be in this budget range. Sometimes they'll give you the genre, but not necessarily. Often they want it to be dramatic, so it's often going to be
So they can like, look at my performance. Exactly.
they want the
right.
range. That guy was shortlisted for a superhero film.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day. So he didn't get the role, and then he's like, I want this and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Feeling a bit bad for himself.
No, he knew the business. The business was like, we need more proof of concept for you as an actor. We need more of this.
Yeah.
So he goes, I know the business. I know that I've got to go do this. And you see it with a lot. Who did I watched one the other day, and it was clearly a vehicle for a young actor to go, oh, you know what it was? It was The Believer with Ryan Gosling. He plays a neo-Nazi.
Okay.
Great little film. I say that, but he cheated at the end. I didn't like it.
Almost.
Yeah, it was clearly written with the spectacle in mind, because he pontificates about the Jews and how they ruin everything. He goes on a really, and it's written by a Jewish guy, so he's clearly it's kind of a coming of age of a guy who's Jewish, who's trying to understand how to be a Jew. But you could see this is a vehicle for Gosling. He's going to come out. He's going to do this serious, very, very serious, and he's young too in it. So it would have been. He was in the Mickey Mouse Club and everything, wasn't he?
That was like late 90s then? Or
Yeah, somewhere in there.
I remember that movie.
Yeah, very, very powerful bit of work from him. You know, and to put yourself in there, you know you're going to get people looking at you. You come out, you're the lead in an anti-Jewish film. Wild stuff. Yeah. But that was clearly to me, that's an industry piece. That's clearly a vehicle. Someone said, "Oh, we need Ryan to do something serious. We want it to be known. This is an easy walk-in, highly dramatic, highly controversial, beautiful industry piece."
It just reminded me of the movie, Romper Stomper.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking as soon as you said that. I'm like, I watched it for the first time maybe last year.
Yeah.
I thought it was like an interesting film, but it did remind me of that. It's like, oh, here's this character, very obviously bad dude, dealing with these issues. Because this was it like Vietnam War? So like they hated the Vietnamese and they're like fighting them in the streets and stuff. Yeah. And it's pretty brutal. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, oh my God. Like that's what it reminds me of though, like that kind of film.
So after you finish the script, so can you tell us a bit more about the journey? So let's when you finish the script, where does the script go?
Again, it would depend on who's it for and why it's been written.
Yeah.
That one ended up not really going anywhere. I remember he couldn't get funding for it.
Yeah.
And he worked on a bunch of other stuff, and then he worked on a whole bunch of features, so he didn't need it.
Okay.
So it was there. That's the other sort of quiet secret, is that most of the stuff you write doesn't get made. So that's another thing I got told in film school was you might write 10 things, and classically in the system, so this doesn't work for everybody, this is what used to happen, you'd write 10 things, 7 of them would never get made, 7 out of 10. 2 would get optioned and 1 would get made. So every 10th thing you write might get you something on the screen.
Wow.
And that's how it usually was. But I went a bit different. Maybe 10 years ago, it was more than 10 years ago, I met with a guy who was doing a lecture series here, and he'd been the head of BBC development, documentary, I think. But he'd come here to do a lecture series on Aristotle's Poetics. So I'm a big fan of that. The function of tragedy, the function of spectacle, all this sort of stuff. And he said to us in a Q&A afterwards, he said, if you're a writer and you're not producing your own stuff in this country, you're never going to get anything made. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I hadn't had anything made at that point, feature-wise. Nothing big. I'd sold a bunch of stuff, sold a bunch of screenplays, done writing for hire work, written on TV series, done all this sort of stuff. But I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't sat in a cinema. And that was the game for me. I wanted to sit in the cinema and watch something I'd made affect some people. That was the reason you do it. But he said he was really stark about it, and I thought it's one of those moments where you realise you've turned a corner for something. Something's dramatically changed in that moment, and from then on, I've always produced. I've been a producer on the writing that I've done. So I want to get, if I'm going to devote the time to it, it's going to get made. And I'm going to put work into getting it made, and that's a different sort of setup.
So, like from a producer writer's perspective, like let's say when you have a script that you really want to get made, what's the first thing that you would do? Who would you contact, or what would be the first thing
you act as a producer in that respect? You look for people that you think can get the stuff done. So I'm doing a new media project at the moment, and kind of headhunting other producers to work on it, because I know what I want from it. So I'm starting to see, okay, which heads of departments do I want working on it? So you have to put the producer hat on. When you're a writer-producer, you go, I'm going to forget the writing part of it for now. I'm just going to quarterback the project and see, okay, what do I want from it? Who do I want to work with? Are they available? All this sort of stuff. So you just start looking at putting the pieces in place and going from that perspective. Then you put the writing hat back on and go, okay, let's develop this thing. So I developed it for about 18 months before I went headhunting. I was like, is this worth putting time into? Is it good for the marketplace? Can I get the money for it? Who would I aim it at? That's another big one. Who's going to give me the money? Where's it going to sit? What's the end game for it? If you don't have these questions answered and someone asks you, it's not a good look.
Is that a lot of personal research? Is that like time you put in, or do you have like a guy or a couple of people that are like, let's get some research?
I mean, I could, but that's part of the game. It's part of the fun, I think, for me anyway.
It sounds to me, it sounds to me like a business proposal.
Yeah.
Especially when you're looking for funding. Like it brings me back to our conversation about Wes Anderson for his first movie, Bottle Rocket.
Yeah.
He met with one of the producers, and the studio was looking for a small budget movie, and they had $5 million to spend.
Yeah.
And he had a meeting with the producer, and somehow he convinced them to give him the $5 million.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not about like how good the script is. It
Yeah.
might have something to do with that, but I think it has more like all about the business acumen that he has. Like this will be for this audience. I know this guy. I know this guy. I know this guy. So if I make this movie, all of them will join me.
Yeah.
So you have no choice but to give me the money.
Yeah. It often happens like that. Like we had one where we did a feature and we sold the feature to a distributor who'd never read the screenplay
Unbelievable.
prior to production. And he gave us the money for the production based on, I don't even know if, I know he knew the genre. He at least knew the genre of the film.
Oh my gosh.
But he didn't know much else. And he didn't care. He's like, oh, we've got a gap in the schedule here. We're happy to have it. It's in this genre. Fair enough. And we're like, okay, cool.
Jeez.
Fair enough. Yeah, a lot of that other side of it is just complete business. Like we did a doco and we had to go to a festival and we did the marketplace there, and you meet with distributors and you meet with producers and you meet with agents, you meet with everybody. It's the fun ones, the festival, the fun ones are where you spend 2 or 3 weeks getting pissed every day with other filmmakers. It's the best. It's
There
the
you go,
most
Tim.
fun.
There you go.
It's the most fun.
I can do the getting pissed part.
Yeah, you've got that part down. That's half of it. During those festivals, you go to screenings during the day and you watch other stuff, and then you do the meetings. I love this is one of my favorite quotes. Just on a side note, we make films so we can have the meetings. It's one of my favorite quotes because it is a bit like that. So for 2 or 3 weeks, you go through, you watch films with other filmmakers, which is a blast. Then you have some drinks and some cocktails, and you pitch a little bit, and then you have the party at night. And then that's where you really talk about film. That's where the real conversation.
That's when it gets down.
All that's in prep for that for the conversation at the end.
Yeah.
But you sit there and you've got. You usually bring, say, 3 or more ideas, and you'll usually put them in a proposal. You put them in a lookbook or a Bible or a pitch deck or anything like that. You put them together, and you say, "Hey, this is what I'm offering. This is what I'm selling," and they'll buy it or they won't.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what would make a good proposal and what would make a bad proposal?
It would be completely depend on who you're selling to.
Yeah.
And you've got a good proposal. They know you know them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They know you've done research on them. They know you've done the last 5 years of what they've bought. They know what marketplaces they're interested in. They know their demographics. They know all of that stuff. And you should know that selling to them. A bad pitch is when you don't know those things.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like a job interview.
Well, yeah,
Like every proposal is a job interview.
it's even just understanding who you're selling to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You are a salesman at that point.
Yeah.
You are selling to an audience. That might be an audience of one, and this person might be very, very powerful in the industry.
But that's the thing, it's the
And you
starting
know.
off point, right? Because you're not getting anywhere without that first
No.
step, right?
No. And they're the key holders, especially if you're looking
The
at
gatekeepers is the big word, right? Like,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. They can make or break what your project, if your project even gets off the ground.
So from a producer's perspective, it sounds to me like you're acting like a salesman for your own project.
Without a doubt.
But what if someone else comes to you with a script and say, I want to make this movie. Can you help me produce it? Does that happen? Like then you have to go out and sell that movie to other people.
Have I done that? I don't think I've ever done that.
Okay.
I've never worked solely as a producer on someone else's piece. I've worked on crew, so I've done assistant directing, first ADing. I've worked in the camera department. I was a camera operator first and foremost for maybe the first 5 years of working in production. Because again, in film school, they say you don't. This idea that you're going to walk into a writer and directing position when you're 19 is stupid.
Yeah.
It happens once in a while, but it doesn't. Most people aren't. That's not the pipeline for them.
Yeah.
You go work in my first experience on a feature film set was as an extra.
Oh.
Yeah, I worked on.
Which movie was
Jim
it?
Jarmusch. No, not Jim Jarmusch. That's the director. It was something like James something. It had the guy from I could look it up.
Yeah.
They shot it in the city. It was a period piece. They shot it in one of the theaters there. I did 2 weeks worth of extra work on it, and was nobody. Wasn't even allowed to touch a coffee. Like I wasn't allowed to. I was like, I can do some PR work. No. You sit with the other extras for 8 hours and just shut the up and let us shoot.
Yeah.
So for a long time there, I did shit kicker work. I was a PA for 5 years at least, running people's coffees. What do you need? Get it done, and just seeing it from that level up.
Yeah.
That should be the expectation. Because you're nobody. Why would I trust? Like it's like saying, you're going to be a plumber. It's your first day on the job. We're going to let you plumb this $6 million mansion. Like, Are you an idiot? We wouldn't let you. We wouldn't let you change the bog roll in the toilet. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you wouldn't expect it anywhere else, but you get a lot of student filmmakers coming in and thinking they're in the next Tarantino. It's a weird perception of the business.
I think because it's creative as well, right? Because they. Probably different to most other media where I know now it's like you could probably make something and produce it and set it yourself easier, whether it's up to the standards or not. But like coming in being like, oh, look, I've done this. I can run a set or whatever where it's like you probably have no idea how it runs, right? Like that's why coming in from the lower level and maybe understanding everything first and how it all runs before you actually take the reins or even have a chance.
And you miss the connectivity issue, which is you might be able to edit something in Premiere or DaVinci or anything. That does not make you an editor by any stretch of the imagination. You can press just because you can press some buttons on a screen doesn't mean that's not the game. The game isn't the pressing the buttons. The game is what you're cutting and how you're cutting it. That's the game. Because there's plenty of editors. Like I worked for Lonely Planet for a little bit and I was assistant editor for them. And I would triage all of the material prior to the senior editor coming in, and sometimes he would let me drive the machine while he's sitting there telling me stuff. So he wouldn't even sit at the desk.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you just understood what he wanted, right?
Yeah. And he was like, just sit back and being in the room with those guys. I've worked with some great ones. Like we worked with one recently. She's so fucking good at what she does. And again, she wasn't at the machine. I was driving it. I was sitting in front of the edit rig, and she came in and she was sitting off, and we went through. And she's an editor, but she didn't have to touch the machine. Yeah, and she's an amazing editor. Like she knows about emotive beats, and she just has she's worked to flex the muscle so much that's automatic for her now. It's instinctual. So again, this idea that picking up a camera makes you the director or working on it, so it makes you clearly doesn't. Picking up a hammer doesn't make you a carpenter.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's again one of those ones that I see often is that there's you got to be realistic about the journey a little bit. You got to be realistic about the pipeline. My favorite version of it is back in the Victorian era. If you wanted to be a painter, for the first 3 years of being a painter, you weren't allowed to make anything of your own. You had to go into the Louvre and you had to go into these places and you had to copy the great works because you had to see what it was like to make them first. And that's what I say to a lot of new filmmakers. I'm like, I know you got plenty of ideas, write them down, get them out. They're there for a reason, but go and flex the muscle first. Go copy. See if you can make something that you like, because then you know how to make the thing you like. Go copy a scene. Go grab a favorite film of yours. Grab your favorite scene and go, I'm going to remake this with my mates with some phones. And see what goes into it and why. Because again, the breaking the shot, a lot of people don't do it enough. I sometimes do breakdowns, but I've done a lot of them over the lifetime because sometimes a production company will ask you to do a breakdown. I'll do a breakdown by shot. How often do you miss shots because your brain's connecting the tissue and you forget that you've even seen it? When you break it down, literally have to break down, get a spreadsheet and break every shot down, you realise, there's so much stuff here I missed. Because you're looking at the entire frame in pause for multiple minutes trying to work out what the hell's going on here. So when you haven't done that, how do you even know what you're working on? Yeah, it's a strange one for me when I see it.
It seems to me it's like, Tim, like correct me if I'm wrong. This is like deconstructing a dish, right? So like when you make a dish before it gets onto the plate, you basically have to do a pre-production. I need all these ingredients. And they need to be cooked this way, and then they need to be presented this way. But when you get onto the dish and then someone else eat it, they will deconstruct that. Oh, this is how they make it. This is how they cook it.
Well,
these are the ingredients.
If they understand how it's even done, usually they're just like, oh, it's got too many peas. But like with a dish, most of the time, like, because we've been cooking for so long that you just get the recipe and you make it, right? But then when you eat it, that's when you can tell, like, I want it to be a bit spicier.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too salty.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm like, maybe I don't like the leeks in it or whatever.
Yeah.
So then you can make your own, understand how the dish works, then make your changes, right? Coming from the base of what it is before going off and doing your own changes to it, I feel like is always a good start for most things, right?
Yeah, and the idea is very similar. Now we are following the recipes.
Yeah.
Like someone else has already made it. People liked it.
Yeah.
But
I didn't realize you guys worked in kitchen.
That's how we met.
Yeah.
9 years ago.
Back of house, front of house?
Back. Chef and chef.
Nice.
Yeah.
I worked as a steak chef for a while.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
you
Yeah, I
are.
worked in a kitchen. I actually liked being a dish pig.
Yeah?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a good break.
I was going to say, we ran into a few that didn't like it.
Yeah,
A lot
I
of
didn't
guys
mind
that
it.
are just
Yeah.
like, we're like, can you do this?
Everyone seems to hate it, but there's this like, it's almost a bit zen.
I agree with you. I
get
know
locked
exactly
in.
what you're talking about.
Because
Yeah.
you're
You're
a bit locked in,
Yes.
and you kind of just, there's a flow state that goes on,
Yeah.
and when you're
Definitely
working, the
definitely
time
in the
goes
service.
quick.
In the service.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was always my favorite part. When there's like a
Yeah.
busy service, you're doing like 100, 150 people.
Oh, yeah.
You're just in like a state and everyone's like, in a good team, everyone's clicking and everyone's like,
Without a doubt.
communicating and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and the dish pick has to be on it half the time. Well,
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, when you're busy as well, they've got like stacked up and they're kind of like cruising along like,
Yeah.
No, get
Yeah.
it done.
Yeah.
And I remember I really used to enjoy getting the calls because you can hear the line, how the line's humming. And when they're calling for stuff, you can see you can kind of like get a
Wow.
feel for how that's a working.
So that's
out.
like the directing, right? Like that's
Yeah.
a little bit.
something I thought I was all right at.
Yeah.
It also depends who you work with because
Yeah, without a doubt.
what kitchen we worked in, we had like 4 stations. We had like dessert larder, then like pan,
Grill. Yeah.
fryer.
Fryer, yeah.
So they had 2 chefs there, 2 chefs there, and then the line chef. And then the line chef's like, we need a salad, we need chips, we need steak. And I'd always be like, what dish? This is the dish we're coming up. This is what we need. And then you communicate it to everybody else and see
Yeah.
where they're at.
Yeah.
Because I'd always like, someone's like, I'm in the shit. So, all right, we can push this back. We can wait. And then we can push this food first
Yeah.
and wait. But
Yeah.
we did work with another chef he was a head chef for a while. He was terrible.
It was terrible.
I couldn't believe it.
No.
He'd like, because I remember one night, it must have been like the first or second week we worked together, and it was just me and him in the kitchen. It was like a Tuesday. Well, I won't get busy. Got busy. I'm doing all the hot food myself, doing all the dishes, and he's like sending food. And I'm like, I sent you this. He's like, yeah, I sent that to another table. I'm like, what? I'm like doing 3 other different tables at once. And you've just sent a note. He's like, no, don't worry about that. And I'm like, all right, no worries. And I'm just like, I'll
Don't
put this
worry
back on.
about it,
yeah.
And he's just there chatting with the maitre d', having a good time. I'm like, mate, I'm like losing myself here cooking for everybody. And you're just like, oh, this looks nice. I'll send this off. And I couldn't believe
Jesus
it. So I couldn't
Christ.
imagine doing a job and
Yeah.
someone's like, I'm doing this now. And you're like, what?
Yeah. And that's and I think that's a very hard balance, right? Because if you are the director, technically you mentioned, everyone has to follow, everyone has to try to make your vision. But if you are not a good director and you don't work well with other people, what would happen? Like, have you ever been in that situation before?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
The bad head chef, like the horrible one.
Yeah. I've met
chef,
many
yeah.
a bad chef on a set. It's the smart ones know to surround themselves with people that shore up their deficiency. So get a really good first AD.
Yeah.
And get someone that you work with well that can decipher some of the stuff that you might not be putting out there. Because you often get there's classically the example of bad acting directors. So guys that don't work well with actors, they might have a really good cinematic language, but they don't get the performances out of the actors that they need to. And you get that sometimes. But often when you get to a certain level, the proficiency with the crew is usually locked in. They know how to get what they want.
Yeah.
But there are times when you can see them struggling, especially with like some of the actors that I've worked with. I'm like, just you're never going to get what you want out of this guy because actors come in with their own stuff as well because they are the face of so much of it.
Yeah.
They've got their own agendas and their own stuff that they want to be doing. So yeah.
Wow.
It's a tough one.
I was even going to say, even with like looking at actors, how's that like compared to like getting anyone else to work on the film? Because I could imagine that would maybe be the hardest thing for them to like even buy into whatever you're trying to do, or if they're, like you said, got their own agenda and it's like, well, I'm doing this for myself more than I am doing it for the film.
They've often got their own trajectory and they've got their own reason for doing it and what they want out of it. And sometimes they'll even come to that's the funnest ones for me. The one of the biggest sort of demystifiers in the industry for me was when I worked on one of my first features and the casting director wanted to change the script. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like it was very green of me at the time, but I was like, you're nobody. Like we've put 18 months into writing this fucking script. We did all the back end work. We got all of the development money for everything. And this casting director's like, oh, we want this person in it. They're at the right stage of their this, blah, 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 blah. And we want to change the story. So this is what happens. Well, just like, who the f- is this guy? Like, who are you to tell? Hey, and you quickly realize, hold on, these are definitely gatekeepers in the industry. They are one of the gatekeeping roles because they have access to the people that you want to put in your piece.
Wow.
So they have much more sway than you think, and you kind of have to give them their grace a little bit. Are they going to change the piece? Probably not. But sometimes it's just about massaging the interactions so they can feel important and all this sort of stuff.
Okay, like giving them a little thing that's like, oh, make it feel like a big change. And like, okay, I've done.
And they want to be able to say to their actors, oh, I did this for
feed
you.
the ego. Feed the ego
wow,
was meant to be
okay,
like,
I
oh,
see.
yeah, see, I went
It's
above
all
and
part of the
beyond for
game,
you.
yeah.
I
It's
got
part of
what
the
you
game.
wanted. Yeah.
It's part of the game. Yeah.
So is there, like, I was going to say, you've already mentioned kind of like two gatekeepers. Is there quite a lot? Like, I could imagine in this industry where there's like,
I won't go into
know-
the real ones.
yeah, but I mean like huge,
That'd get me
huge
blacklisted.
egos, like a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Like,
And they all want their say, so they want to be able to say what they want to say. My favorite, I'll tell you my favorite one off camera, because they would kill me.
Yeah.
But there's, when you get to the real top levels, you realize. Like I remember, I say this to a lot of my mates, but I remember meeting, Hitler's propagandist Goebbels.
Yeah.
I remember meeting Goebbels, a person I was like, oh, you're f***ing Goebbels. You're a propaganda. You're a genuine die-in-the-wall propagandist. And this is not film anymore. We're making propaganda. And I thought, this is I didn't expect to see this part of the industry.
Yeah.
As I didn't expect it to see it as starkly as it was. Okay. And I think because we lucked ourselves into a meeting with someone we probably shouldn't have been meeting.
Oh, okay.
I was probably 2 or 3 levels away from this person.
Wow.
So we probably shouldn't have been meeting with them ever. They probably never should have let me in the room. And
You're just wandering.
yeah. No, you couldn't walk in. There was armed guards getting into that building.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm meeting with a person who is clearly out of my price range. They liked one of the pitches, by the way, which is where they went into their Goebbels mode. They grabbed the idea and then they started shaping it into the propaganda. And me and the director is just sitting there like we're watching a magician go to work. And that's a different
Side.
completely different side to it.
Wow.
Because that's probably, I guess, a lot of filmmakers or people in the industry wouldn't think about it that
No.
much. Because
No.
that's been a huge side of like media for a long time,
Yeah.
about twisting a story to meet what you want rather than maybe what the original vision was.
Without a doubt. And I'm convinced that probably about 30% of it is that all the time. It's
whether
more my favorite.
it's big or small, because sometimes it's a blatant and sometimes it's like maybe a little thing that's just like maybe
My
you don't
favorite's
notice.
watching American stuff and knowing that there's someone from an intelligence organization steering the ship. And then the reverse happens where you watch international especially stuff out of China where you're like,
China's probably the biggest
that,
one.
this is mostly propaganda.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, but what are they trying to say with it? That's the interesting part. Like, what's the message here?
What's the propaganda?
Yeah.
What are they trying to say? Yeah.
Like I remember watching, like if I see anything like First Man, that's they're trying to get money for something. This is a conversation that America's having with the international organizations, but also with itself. They're trying to boost numbers. They're trying to get money. So what do? They put a feel good. That whole story is so funny. Like it's a long Hallmark film. You know, it's the happy family and all this sort of stuff, and he's a singular guy, and it's almost like Friday Night Lights for NASA. You know what I mean? Like it's beautiful propaganda, but you know this is. You know where the money for this is coming from. You know who's quarterbacking this. This isn't.
Speaking about financing, like this is another thing that a lot of young filmmakers don't think about. So like they had all these ideas. They wrote the screenplays, and then how do I make this money now?
Yeah.
So what would be some of the strategies or advices that you can give to young filmmakers about getting financing?
Start with the budget first. Right into the budget.
That's
not the other way around.
But that's the boring part, though. Like nobody wants to work with budgets and numbers, right?
No, I think that's actually for me. Was it Hemingway? Someone like this idea of a blank white page is daunting. When someone says write one character in one room at the top of the page, now you've got parameters to work with. So there's a genius in there, and that to me that's more of the game than saying what do I want to make, that kind of thing. I can, there's plenty of ideas I want to sit there and make, but it's how do I get those ideas into the idea that I'm already making. So I was having a conversation with a mate only a couple of days ago about we made a piece that was the opposite of what it presented itself as.
Okay.
So we did look, because one of my favourite times in sort of all of cinema is in the 1930s, where you had this massive, like the MPAA era, where you had this massive sort of overreach by censors to tell filmmakers what to make, and you have Hitchcock come out and he makes this sort of like subversively gay film. He makes Rope. It's about these boys in this apartment having this time, and you realise he's flying in the face of all this censorship to make the film that he wants to make, while also making the film that they buy. That to me is the genius. Like anyone can make anything that they want, but how do you do it in a way that engages with your society? And that to me is when someone says, what is art to you? I have a very hard and fast definition of art. Art is when is the argument the artist is having with the place they're from. That's the threshold for art, because everything else before that's craft. Yeah, if I'm just making something, that's craft. But the argument is when you're bringing the group into the conversation. I'm gonna be the orator for us, and I'm gonna have the conversation we need to have about our culture. That's the qualification for art. And I know plenty of people have issues with that, but to me that's the qualifying sort of line. And Hitchcock did that with that film. He's having a conversation with not only the film industry, but he's having a conversation with the wider American community about censorship and about treating people as people and all this sort of stuff. So he's crossing that boundary, but he makes it in a commercial way. Genius. So when someone says, like when the original question was about financing, it's like don't see the parameters as handcuffs.
Restricting.
Yeah, see them as how good are you at this?
Yeah. Try to take it as a challenge to work around, rather than just be like, this is what I wanted to do now. Can't really do it.
And to me, that's almost the fun now. Like this new media thing that I've got going. I wanted to see if I could make a film, create an arc for a film in 1 minute slices over 90 minutes.
Oh wow!
So is it possible technically? And it's like, this is a good challenge. Okay, so what's it about then? And and while I'm considering that, I'm looking at it and going, can I get money for this? Yeah, I can. If I write it in a certain way, this is going to be really easy to get money for. So then again, okay, now what is the idea? And the idea, I've got all the development work for the idea. The idea is so far away from the original, so far away from it. But it was working within those parameters that brings out the genius a little bit. Yeah.
That's like the second side of like creation, right? Like you've made it, but how do you work it into like your restrictions, or even
without a doubt,
kind of like what you've been put into? Because I think that means a lot as well, right?
The industry respects that too, because then you've showed them that you're playing the game with them, and they want that.
They
want you to play with them. They want you to respect them. So show them some respect.
And it reminds me of one of the things that I learned from RMIT back then. One of my teachers told me that creativity means restrictions. Because like if you go onto a blank page, people say, here's a blank page, make something. So what do I make? What color do you want to use? So the more restrictions that you put onto an art piece, the more creativity comes out. It's very weird.
It is strange like
yeah.
that. It's like, just make whatever you want. It's a lot to go off, right?
I think there's a bit of a psychological aspect in there as well, because that's another one of the defining lines for me with creatives. If you're writing it for you, you're doing a bit of psychological work on yourself. What are you trying to work out that you're trying to use your craft
what
to talk
experiences
about?
are you trying to bring out? Yeah.
And often, like, I'll get hired by a company and they'll come in and say, work on this screenplay. And that's often what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to work out what the person was trying to tell themselves. If it's an early writer, a young writer, I'm usually trying to find out what they were trying to talk about to themselves, because then we can find out where it doesn't work.
Is there a lot of back and forth then? Will you like sit down with them and be like, okay, let's go through this?
I will say this, you would know, you can read stuff where you get good enough that you're like, I'm pretty sure I know where this is going, and what they're angry. Like, I had one recently where I was doing a rom-com, and this lady had written it, and the production company had hired me to fix the ending. The ending was not good. It didn't work out, and because she was getting the ending she wanted, the writer was getting the ending that she wanted. So I have to come in and try to show her technically why this isn't working out, and why it's not going to work for an audience, and why the production company has got their issues with it. So the producer doesn't have the craft to talk to the writer about exactly why this technically doesn't work.
So it's not just a failure of like maybe the writing or even like the outline. It's kind of like a team failure where it's like the communication didn't come across. Maybe there wasn't a way.
I wouldn't even say it's a failure, because the production company knows that's not their bag.
Okay.
So they're not trying to convince the writer. They might say, we don't like the ending.
Yeah.
But they're not going to tell them how why it doesn't work, and what might be a potential resolution for it, because that's the big game in the end, and that's what I usually get paid for. Is we know it doesn't work, we kind of know why it doesn't work, but how can we fix it? So that's what they're paying me to come in to do, because I'm a structuralist. So I'll go in and go, okay, this conflict isn't supporting this resolution and this sort of stuff. You're hanging stuff on other stuff. So we had long conversations about why the ending didn't work too well. And then why it didn't work too well. And then I did my psychologist rant where I put my hat on and said, what are we talking about here, love? Why are you wanting to talk about this? And why? And it was clearly something she was extricating.
Okay.
But it was still a great screenplay. Still a great screenplay. And I said, okay, you got what you wanted out of it. What if we did this, this, or this? And I usually try to give 2 or 3 options, because there's usually a way to get out of it. There's preferential ones, but there's usually multiple ways to fix it. There isn't always just one way out. And that sometimes that'll just lead to us having a conversation about a 4th or 5th way. And then they'll pick maybe the 5th one. So you know that they're precious, especially like I'm a very precious writer sometimes.
I think a lot of people would be that, right? Like you put a lot of work and effort, and like especially like you
hurt
say
yourself doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's coming from yourself, and it's hard if someone's like, "Hey, this doesn't really work," and you're like, "Oh, I know it works."
You know how it feels.
And
and that's what you want. You want to give the person the feeling, but it's negotiating it through all this other stuff to get it to into their head.
Can you tell us a bit more about like when you work on the screenplays made by young writers? What are some of the common mistakes? What are some of the common challenges that you come across when you work with the young writers?
It's often that not recognizing the audience.
Right.
So when you write, as soon as you write something, you've engaged an audience. You've put it in the external, just like our conversation here. As soon as like there's always a 4th party in the room. There's a 4th party in the room right now who's listening to it, and you have to modulate for that party. That's the biggest mistake young filmmakers make, young writers make. They don't consider the audience enough. Some people would say, like I remember watching, is it Rick Rubin, the music producer? He's like, don't listen to your audience. Don't listen to the audience, but at least be aware that they're there.
Yeah, well, without them, you're not there, really. That kind of
and who's
defeats,
it for?
Yeah, because that defeats half the point of.
Are you yelling at your dad? Is this what this is about? Is this
At the end of the day, it's still like entertainment. You're still trying to sell a product.
I'm not sure it's entertainment.
No?
I'm not sure it's entertainment, because that would be the divide. Am I trying to entertain you, or am I trying to change you?
Okay. But
because that's the
there can be a line still with that, even like it can still do both, or even
without a doubt,
or one or the other. Like I'm sure everyone's seen a film where it's like, okay, they don't really care what's going on. They just wanted the big action, the big explosions, the big car driving over another building into another building.
That's arguably where we're at right now.
There's a lot of that.
We're in a spectacle-driven sort of...
which is why when there's some like we could probably point out a few films that there's certain films where you're like, oh, these are trying to do something different that we haven't seen in a long time or even haven't seen, which is always enjoyable. Whether it's good or not, you know, is another thing entirely. But because like Robert Eggers is one I think about. He's like an interesting director. Even Yorgos Lanthimos, I can't say his name.
Yorgos Lanthimos.
He's a very strange,
the absurdist kind of director, writers.
That's a conversation with the audience. Clearly, a conversation with the audience. So, is he trying to produce catharsis? I would say he probably is.
Because there's a lot of challenging stuff in his films as well. Because I've seen a lot of feedback, especially from women, where it's like, well, this is very like on the line, or even about past their line about dealing with like SA and like sexual stuff with older men with younger women and stuff. So it's also like challenging your own perspective of stuff. Sometimes that's what I enjoy in films. Sometimes, what's he trying to get across with this, right?
That's the aim of catharsis. So where that originally came from is this idea of social evolution. So back in ancient Greece, when you had like the Colosseum and stuff, and you had you had plays and you had Oedipus and all this sort of stuff. If you wanted to be a citizen of the state, to vote, that's what it meant to be a citizen. You had the right to vote. You had to qualify to vote. To qualify to vote, you had to go engage in tragedy. You had to go and engage in social evolution because it built empathy. So you go watch Oedipus Rex. You go to you go Pantheon, and you sit down with your mates, and we watch this tragic story, and then we talk about it afterwards. So we could be citizens. So we could qualify to vote. Because if you weren't interested in that, that's fine. Stay home. You know, you watch the funny stuff, and you get entertained. But if you wanted to have a say in how things are, you had to be a fully fledged sort of individual. And that's where that original idea of sort of catharsis comes from, is this idea that you're vicariously going through a story. It's like playing a video game. I'm playing this game in order that at the end I've gained something more than when I started. And it wasn't just me being entertained. It was you developing the muscle that the character goes through, so you can do it with no risk.
Yeah,
I get to kill the king and the dragon without having to ever swing the sword.
There is kind of a disconnect, but also you are having more control than most other media because you are doing what the character is doing. Like you are having a say in doing these things, whether it is like you connect with the character, you might want to do horrible things because, oh shit, like I feel like he's a good guy, he wouldn't do this. Yeah. Or you might be the other way, it's like I feel like he's a terrible person, he would do this thing. So it's like asking the question to yourself whether or not you think about it that much. Because generally without
any risk.
Because that's why I've played a lot of video games and I enjoy like sometimes you just out to have, but sometimes some characters you're like, oh shit, I really feel for them, like their struggles, their lively goals and whatever they're trying to get out at the end of the game. So it's like it is like that aspect of like what are you taking much from it, or are you just kind of taking it for face value? But I think that's the same with film as well, almost. Like you're like, whether or not you're taking it in too much, but it is.
But that's kind of the rationale behind it. The rationale was, what's the utility of it? And that's why it's also when you said is it entertaining? Those guys, I don't know that they want to be, because they want to have the conversation. They want their own artistic integrity comes before everything else. They want to have the argument,
which is always interesting, right? Because they're not coming from that aspect of like, I'm not putting this out there to make $1 billion, which is like most of what Hollywood's aiming for. They're like, will this make $1 billion? That's what we want. Not too worried about like what the film is saying or even challenging the audience. Like Furiosa, I really enjoyed last year. Like it's maybe not the most challenging film, but I think it does a lot well and interesting for like a big blockbuster film, but it didn't really resonate. And I was a bit sad. I'm like, oh shit, I would have loved like another one of these films, but I don't think there will be now. So like I think it does challenge you a bit, but not like I would say a normal Hollywood film would do, but like it is like a weird thing to look at in like the aspect, I guess, in Hollywood in general, right?
So the question that I have is, what would be the sweet spot for the level of catharsis? Because I think nowadays the golden child of the movie industry is the movie that challenges people, but it's also entertaining. I think a lot of directors, not just in Hollywood, but all over the world, they're trying to achieve that. So let's get back to the idea of catharsis and where would that level needs to be to achieve that sweet spot?
I don't even know how to answer that question.
You'd probably make a lot of money if you did, I'm assuming.
It reminds me of a conversation that Guy Ritchie had on a podcast about the level of engagement that you're trying to bring in. You take a film like Aladdin, the Aladdin, not
the original.
Yeah. that has wonderful catharsis in it. It's a kid's film. It's available to everybody. It's entertaining as you know, Robin Williams killing the game.
Yeah.
And you have the catharsis and you have the social commentary. This is execution. This is it. This is you've done it. I mean, Miyazaki's my favorite version of it. His catharsis is so dense. Like Spirited Away is one of my favorite.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh yeah.
It's one of my favorite films because he pulls it off. He makes this. I can go watch this with my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
And I can watch it with their grandparents, and we can still.
Everyone's going to get something from it.
Not everyone's going to get the same thing from Aladdin.
No.
But somehow Miyazaki pulls it off where everyone gets the same feeling at some point. My 8-year-old niece and my 80-year-old parent, at one point they can be feeling the same melancholy or the same something.
Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to do in film. It really easy to do in music, supposedly. You can get everyone to feel the same thing.
Because with music you're literally singing the emotion or singing the pain, like, and it's easier to like get that across, and you can understand it a bit easier. Where in film it might be a bit more. It's harder to like.
The degree of difficulty is so high.
Which is crazy. Like you can also use music in film to help, but it's not quite the same.
Music is that's what you use it for. The visuals tell you what to think. The music tells you how to feel. That's a classic.
Is that why they use Joker and the Thief in every film I've seen?
What's that?
I don't know if you've ever listened to Wolfmother. Joker and the Thief. I feel like
it's in everything now.
I'm like, why is
I
this
saw it in
still?
Brazic recently, the TV series, and I was like, it's even in this.
It's in everything. I can't believe it. I'm like, these guys have broken up and come back like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
This one song gets played in every movie clip I've seen.
Because symbolically it has archetypes in it. So it would be Jungian in that respect. It's a resonant symbol. The Joker and the Thieves, these are resonant symbols. So you can use them across anything. You know, that's what you're really trying to tap into. And I would say, you asked a question earlier about young writers. I would say go back and study there. Go back and study Jung. Go back and study symbolism. These are all symbols. This idea that characters are people, I wish we'd get rid of this idea real quickly. They're not people. Characters are not people. I'll say it again. Characters are not people. They're symbols.
Yep.
And they're usually symbols of actions. If I want to move this water over here, I write a character to move the water over here. You know, I write the story arc to have these things happen. I write symbols to make them happen. That's how that works. This idea that, it's representative of a person. A character is such a thin representation of a person. The same as a carving on a wall. Like if I carve, a person standing there, is that a person? Not. Even if it was, even if I did a painting of a person, it's still the person at that moment, still not them. So this idea that, they're representative of people, exponentially more complex than a 2D version of a symbol.
That's very interesting. And
stop thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
Because you see young writers they catch themselves in these knots. I've got to write it in this way and it's got to be realistic in this way and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, dude, you're running a marathon without it going anywhere. Stop thinking about it in that way.
Yeah.
They're not people. You don't have to be realistic. They're never going to be realistic. It's never going to be what happened. Because even when you shoot doco, you don't. And I love doco. Like I started doing docos in 2016 and we shot in Ukraine for about 6 years there. And even when you're trying to be realistic, it's not even coming to the gate. You're not even getting to the place, let alone going in the building. It's not even, it's not even close.
Yeah.
It's not even close. So why are you spending all this time and energy trying to make it representative when it's not even a person?
Yeah. And that reminds me of a very interesting idea because like at the time of shooting, this is the Lunar New Year. So in Vietnam, there are a couple of movies in the theaters that people are arguing about. And one of the ideas that they brought up is this person is so realistic. Like this character on the screen is so realistic. I'm pretty sure I know someone or, I have been that person at some point in my life. So can you break that down? Like why would someone say something like that? Yeah.
The guy's wearing a t-shirt. I've worn t-shirts before.
I've never worn a shit t-shirt in my life. I don't know what you're talking about.
I sat down and had a Coke in a diner. That's me. I need to feel connected. I need to feel connected is a thing. We're a social creature. It's fine. But just because the dude wore the same t-shirt as you doesn't mean you're the same person. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to say. I think people want to see themselves in characters, and that's fine. see yourself in a character. That's the whole point of it. They're an avatar for your journey through this piece. They're a symbol for your journey through this piece.
Yeah.
But are they a person? You didn't watch them take a shit that morning, did you? No.
Yeah, you're not living every point of the life, right?
And then the biggest part, even if I watched you for 20, even if Truman showed this shit, even if I watched you for 24 hours, 100 cameras, blah, 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 still wouldn't have what's going on up here.
Yeah, exactly.
I still wouldn't be able to tell you why exactly you did the thing that you did exactly. So even then, you still don't know the person.
Well, even in film, like there is like commentary over like what's happening as well. That's meant to kind of represent the thought, right? As well. They're trying to
voiceover.
yeah, or well, not even, but just trying to recapture what the character's thinking in the moment, right? Which is hard because like I've been listening to Game of Thrones at the moment, and even like he uses a lot. The dialogue isn't so much about characters interacting; it's what the character's thinking most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, I know this person is, I can't really trust them. They've done me wrong in the past, but they're not communicating. They're communicating it to you, not the actual other character they're talking to, which is an interesting way to try to like recapture it. But it's never going to be online. But it is an interesting way to tell the story as well. Trying to tell it from in the mind rather than like with actions. Like,
And it's one of those ones that I've done a couple of adaptations, but I'd love to do. There's 2 books that I really want to adapt, and developing that idea to go from how do you take the inner monologue and then how do you develop it into something that's cinematic. It's a big one, and so that to me is one of those other ones where I look at it and think that'd be an interesting bit of fun. To try to get.
Like on that note, like the 2 Dune movies directed by Denis Villeneuve is an adaptation from the books. And in the books, they had a lot of inner dialogues, like stylized, like italicized. So like, oh, is he really trying to betray me? What is she really thinking? So if we use that as an example, what do you think about the way that Denis tried to capture the inner dialogues visually?
I think it's probably the closest I've seen to a good adaptation. Apart from the one that I really like, but this is purely just a personal one, is The Prisoner of Azkaban. Because I love Cuarón. I love him as a director. That's I think the real game. The real game isn't taking the book and making it into a film. It's making a film version of the book.
Yeah.
And he did that with that book. He brought in all this cinema technique that wasn't in the book, and he used that elements to develop the ideas that were there. Dune for me, it's probably my favorite sci-fi series. I've read all the books. I think it's one of those ones that everyone should read just because it encapsulates humanity in such a very real sense.
The way he writes and the way he kind of shows ideas through the story, it's quite complex, and I think that's why it was hard to kind of like. There's the obviously original Dune movie. I have watched it, and it is like quite tough to get through a point. So
tough.
You can see what he's trying to do, but it's so tough. Like the first start of the film is literally, I think it's the princess. She's like giving a monologue about like what's happening, and it's so hard to like encapsulate how Villeneuve actually shows it on screen rather than like here's like what's happening.
That's the one thing I think is missing in his version of it. Herbert does this overarching political commentary, and he uses the in between the chapters. He does a little like
a quotation, like an insert from
an insert. An insert's a great way to put it. He does a little insert in between the chapters, and he gives you a broader idea, and that's the thing I think is missing. By the way, Dune 2 was one of my favourite cinema experiences I've ever had. I remember someone. This is a great one, by the way. There's a side note. We're sitting in the cinema, and it's the moment where. Paul he's won. He's in the throne room. The emperor's there on his knees, and he's begging. They're all begging for their lives, and he's the man right now. And they keep on doing the turn to where what's her name? His partner
Zendaya's character. I've forgotten her name.
He's turning to her, and you realise something's going on here. And he turns back and he says, "I'm gonna marry your daughter." Someone in the cinema audibly, this lady screamed, "No!" The heartbreak, and I was like, "Oh, he did it! He did it! He brought people into the space so much that this lady is having a visceral response in a room full of people. She's unencumbered, not embarrassed at all, to scream out that this affected her personally. There it is. He did it. He did it. He did the thing. You know.
Love it.
But that's the for me. If we're going to be really critical, and I'm not being overly critical, I think it's an amazing bit of work. But that overarching sense of a grander commentary about humanity and politics and all this sort of stuff. He didn't capture that for me. That the book has. The part of the buy-in for me in the books is I want to hear the commentary on the, you know, why does it work if it's an empire? What is it? What's he talking? And then when the further it goes on, you realize, he's having this conversation about religious zealotry. He's having a conversation about how humanity can't really function with too much bureaucracy. He's having all these really interesting conversations that you lose it in the mix by purely having it this protagonist-driven singular character going through his. It is a traditional coming of age film.
Oh wow! Okay.
He goes through his arc. He denies, you know, that whole point where he's like, I'm not the guy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
fuck
do
off,
this.
blah, blah, blah. And he keeps on making excuses. The maternal figure has to come in and sort of propel him forward, both from Zendaya's character and his mother. There's the loss of the father figure.
Yeah.
This is a very, very classical coming of age for him. And it should be. It's the first book out of the series. But you get lost in that mix. You like, I'm tracking this, but in the books you realise Paul's secondary to that. I don't know if you guys get that from the books, but it's secondary to this conversation about humanity in a real sense. And the funny part is, he wrote that while he was high on mushrooms. So a lot of the symbolism came from him being high, and he got these imagery, which makes me think there's a collective unconscious thing going on. He's actually tapping into something that we're collectively.
I was going to say, there's a lot of visions and stuff in this, and a lot of prophecy and stuff. Right?
The blue liquid is from a mushroom.
Yeah.
That's the truth telling thing. Yeah.
Wow.
And like, I do, because it's hard to project that, like, kind of the aspect of the world, like what's actually kind of like trying to project. It's always hard without, like, because Atreides' story is like very interesting, very like there's a lot going on, but like you said, trying to capture like the overall themes of what like Herbert was going for is tough.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there was any way, like, I don't know how like far you want to get into it, obviously, because he gets 2 films to like go over it. Do you think there was a way to try to like capture that?
I would have brought in more of the Emperor's daughter, because that voice, she
only comes in the second film as well. She's not in the first.
And I think they replace her at the start of the first film. There's the Lord of the Rings moment with Galadriel, you know, the start of the first film where she does the little intro monologue. The intro monologue at the first, I don't think Chani is her name, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
she does that first one, and that really is a strange. Choice to me. That she gets the voice coming out of the gate and then never does it again. And it's like, why that choice? I would have. That's how you bring it back out. So you have that character, and I think in the books it's not only her that does it, but it's also his daughter.
Yeah.
So you start positing it in a future sense and in a larger sense. And in the books you realise, this guy's going to become the dude. He's going to become the emperor, and you realise very early on. So you're all happy with it. It gave you, it got the important stuff out of the way. Now we can enjoy it for what it is. We don't have to ask the question: is he going to survive and all this sort of stuff. So in my head, you bring her back into the story. So imagine during the first film, when the first film is very much just Arrakis. It's just Arrakis. It's traditional two sides. They're f***ing with each other. Turns out they're actually cousins, and you're like, here we go. Shit. And this is Shakespearean. But I would have brought it back out. Have her come in, and she does it in the second film, where she becomes the proxy for some of the audience, but also some of the structure. Exactly. She starts telling us stuff about how things are going to work. She starts having a say. So there's the bit where you realise she's part of the Bene Gesserit, and she's been trained by them. I would have brought that in first film. I would have said, let's bring it back out. It's not just about Paul. It's about this wider world, and have them connect in that respect. And you start foreshadowing their connection, and they're going to run into each other at some point.
And another point, like, because I always worry about with these films, like people's attention to holding on, especially with Frank's kind of like story. I think that's what's challenging, trying to keep Dune's story engaging for like a normal audience member. Because I still remember, this has nothing to do with Dune, but I went to see Christopher Nolan's new movie,
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and I remember I was sitting there with my mate, we're like, oh, we love this. And the guy's like, oh, I didn't even really follow that movie. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, have you not watched any of his films?
I really struggled with Oppenheimer.
Really?
On the first watch.
Have you watched Tenet? That's the one.
Yeah. I've struggled with his films for a while.
Okay, because
I've struggled with his films for a while.
Because Tenet's probably the one that everyone looks at. It's like like insanity on film, like trying to like keep track of what actually.
I'm trying to still work out if it's me and that he's asking for multiple viewings. Because I don't mind a multiple viewing. I often get it wrong on the first viewing. Like I remember two really good examples was the Johnny Depp one, the musical with Helena Bonham Carter.
Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd. I remember watching that.
I remember hating that when I saw it in the cinemas, and then the second watch I was like, "This is motherfucking genius." And The Fountain. The Fountain for me is a film I only got 10th viewing in. And I was like, this is an amazing piece of work. But I clearly remember watching it when it first came out with another filmmaker. And we sat there I remember the credits cutting and we just looking at each other like, what did we just watch? And only after that 8th, 9th, 10th viewing did I go, oh, now I get it. And there's genius in here. It's just sublime film. So sometimes I'm very aware that I'm wrong. But Nolan's doesn't hit me like that. Okay. Nolan's is almost like I'm going searching for meaning that isn't there.
I think that struggles because I think a lot of people do that with these films as well, where they try and maybe look too deeply. But this was more from the fact, I don't know, like, did you go to see it in the film?
Yeah.
Like,
I did.
But you kind of know what
you're getting. Oppenheimer I did as well. Yeah,
but you kind of know
money. Thank you, Chris.
But you kind of know what you're getting into, right? Like, I find it funny. He must have been in his 20s, like he was young. So I was like, I don't know if he ever watched any of his other films, but like rather he got built up in, I know the hype at that point with that and Barbie, and that's maybe why he went to see it rather than not like maybe knowing what he's getting into, because I was already a fan of kind of what he did, and I'm like, I know there's going to be a kind of a bit going on and like trying to understand what he's trying to say and different things that are happening. But that's why it's like, I'm surprised that people maybe don't have a grasp of maybe how a director does things or even the film they're getting into, but that's like a whole other way.
I think you're bang on. I think that getting caught up, how they paired Barbie and Oppenheimer as a thing, I still don't quite understand.
Yeah, it was just such a weird phenomenon.
Yeah. It was so strange.
Yeah. Like it did a good job in the end because it kind of revived.
It got both of them. It was like they piggybacked each other's hype and built more hype than they would have got solo.
Yeah.
My theory is because the two movies are very opposite. Like if you want to watch an atomic bomb movie, go to the right. Watch Barbie movie, go to the left.
The boys go this door.
Yeah.
Which I've watched both films and I both think they're both good, but it's just they're completely different in the aspects of like what they're going for, right?
Yeah.
But
it started off as a competition, didn't it? Who's going to?
Well, a little bit, and then I don't know what happened to be like. But I think it was meant to be as well, like this is kind of like the biggest moment coming back from film from like COVID as well, which I remember because there was Maverick, there was the Tom Cruise film. That was like the first, Top Gun was the first big one. I remember seeing that. I'm like, all right, it's Tom Cruise film. But
complete propaganda. Complete.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that movie was funded by the Department of Defense.
But I mean, Oppenheimer does have that flavor as well.
But it does deal with some of the bureaucracy and kind of like how they like see it and how they're like going forward. Like obviously there's like a lot like, dealing with like communism and, dealing with the actual democracy at the time and stuff. So there's like a lot of different things going at play, but I can definitely see like from like, but it's strange coming from like the Tom Cruise film into these two, which is weird. Like Tom Cruise does make some good fun action movies, but like it being like kind of big and then these films like actually overshadowing it.
I think I have a theory he's trying to kill himself on set and he wants to die on the set of the film.
I don't know. I kind of buy that. Like, he kind of goes.
It would be the best ending to his career.
The ones that I know off the top of my head, the one he broke his leg when he's like jumping over a building.
Yeah, that's Mission Impossible.
There's the one where he's hanging off the side of the plane. As it's like going up. I'm pretty sure he's done some helicopter stuff as well.
That last one where he jumped off the edge of the cliff with the bomb.
Yes, I saw it. He did like a big promo like showing what he did.
And that's the first time you've ever seen something like that where they're like, we're going to show you we're going to show you how we made the shot. The film isn't out yet. It's not out that for another fucking 3 months or whatever. But we are so impressed by this that we want to show you it.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Tom Cruise has got his like little Scientology Bible, and he's like, no, I didn't die by airplane. I didn't die by motorcycle. Didn't die by jumping over a cliff.
I still
what have I
think
got
it's
next?
something like personal with him where he's like, I gave everything to this industry.
Like a
I
martyr,
gave
like
my
a
life.
martyr death. He's just like, look, I've died doing what I love.
It's the young man archetype. It's like the young prince archetype. I want to die for the state.
Even though how he's
I'm gonna
like
die
in
for
his
film.
mid-60s or something. Like
I mean, he
is-
still looks pretty young.
No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I mean. He still looks pretty good, but like,
yeah.
He can still pull it off.
Yeah.
I mean, but you can also have a prince to 60. Look at the head of state for the UK. He was a prince until he was in his 80s or something, wasn't he? No, but the archetype still rings true. I still feel for me, I look at him and think, oh, this is a guy who never really self-actualized because he grew up on film, and that's classically what happens with young actors, is they stay stagnant where they came in. And then they never really grow forward. Like DiCaprio is my favorite. He's a 60-year-old man dating 22-year-old.
another 20, someone under 25. You can't date anyone over.
Because he doesn't have the maturation to date anyone that's got real problems.
Date anyone, that's got some
Yeah.
actual growth.
And he's
after
probably
25.
got so much fear of people taking advantage of him. He's like,
Well, that as well.
I
Yeah, I
can
could
control
imagine
this
that. Yeah,
element.
as like a young,
With a low.
it's like a young actress or a young
Well,
model or something.
the risk is so low because they know he's not there to.
And
Yeah,
even
to
even
build
talking
up, to build
about
home.
even talking about propaganda, they always say like, oh, this model's dating DiCaprio just to kind of like push her name
Without
up
a
a
doubt.
bit, which is like
Without a
with a
doubt.
bit of part of it, but it's always funny to see that when it's like, oh, DiCaprio is like taking advantage of.
It's
this, and
only
like,
predatory one way. It's only really predatory
like I think it's
one
fair
way.
either way, but you can't like.
Oh,
I
it's
know,
absolutely
you know,
both ways.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's exactly. It's
A
exactly.
side note: we recorded. I would have been maybe 22, and we were doing a music video for a Australian rock group, really good rock group. Heaven the Axe, they were called. I still think they're about. We go to part of the script is we're recording in a strip club.
Okay.
So we go in and do the recce. We have a look around. We set it all up, and we start interviewing some of the people that work there, the strippers that work there, to be in the music video. And I think I'd maybe been to a strip club once or something as a laugh. And I watched when we were recording it. When we were sitting there talking to these girls, we went there on a Saturday night to see, okay, what's the vibe like? What does the room feel like, and all this sort of stuff? Because you want to recapture that.
Yeah.
You're looking for cues to try to recapture it. And we're sitting there watching these girls control these men. And I was like, we think that these guys are the predators. They're the absolute prey in this conversation.
Yeah.
I watched the girl. I'm sitting there talking to this director, and she's like, look at this girl. I'm looking at it, and I'm watching this girl upside down, legs akimbo, controlling 4 guys in the room at once without saying anything to them, and got money off of all of them. And I thought, fucking hell, there's got to be something here to this. So we tried to recapture some of that in the actual music video, where there's a portion of it where there's this, you realize, oh, this girl's the predator in this conversation. She's taking complete.
She's the man
She's
eater.
playing these guys off against each other at the same time as getting their
I was
money,
gonna
as
say-
well as being upside down with nothing but a G-string
I'm
on.
the same, but I've only been maybe once or twice to a strip club. But yeah, the same feel, because they come up to you and they like get a cold read on you to be
Oh,
like,
they're so good at it.
Because
They did it to us. They did it to us in the place,
Yeah.
and we're like, no, we're here.
Yeah.
This is a job
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
and they still played the game. And I'm like,
Yeah,
you fuck
yeah.
mother-
Yeah, they come up to us, and I feel like if one gets like, oh no, I'm just
Yeah.
here with like my mates drinking.
Yeah.
I'm not really liking this already, and no one else talked to me. It was just the one
Oh
girl.
yeah, no.
And they all
That's
read.
communal
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah,
Like as
yeah,
soon as
exactly.
they see the type of interaction you just had with her, that's that chip starting your
where my
out.
mate back when he was a bit younger was a sucker. He was like, I went to the strip club and I lost like $300, and I'm like,
Jesus.
mate.
Dude, you didn't lose $300. Drop it.
He didn't lose, but you know what I mean. He loves it. He gets caught. I was like, oh, these lovely
you
women are
paid for
giving
an
me
experience.
attention. Yeah.
You paid for an experience.
I doubt he didn't feel so bad, but I'm just like, Matt. Like, I don't understand. I don't get to that point, but I'm like, oh, like, but it's just like they know who they go for, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Just, you know.
But it was one of those funny ones on set, and I just thought, this is a lesson learned that I'm the prey here. I'm not the predator. I'm the prey.
I'm sure there's
They
some
worked
other
us
spots that
hard.
aren't like, you know, great, but like from ones I haven't seen many, but yeah, it's generally pretty good conditions usually. Like it's not so rough.
Yeah.
Because like I know maybe American films where you think about when you see the strip club and it looks really grotty and like not up to standard and like maybe the women are in like in a real tough position and that's why they're doing it. But like I feel like when I've
None
gone
of these girls were.
no, but that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like when I've gone,
I
there,
felt
I'm
like these were. I felt like these were professional.
They're doing.
dancers.
They're doing much better than what I am.
Oh yeah. I felt like they were like professional dancers who were like, oh, we can make a shit ton of money doing this on the weekends.
Yeah.
And they did. Fucking hell.
Because I'm sure it's probably the mental struggle, like just dealing with that, and then like the outside persona of doing it. Because I think that
most of them don't declare.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
could still imagine like if you had close friends or people. And it's
Oh,
like,
for sure,
and like
yeah.
or family, and they're just like
Yeah.
it gets out, or if if they're whether they're comfortable.
There
or
is
not,
no way that some of these girls weren't professional dancers. The stuff they were pulling.
Oh no, definitely. There's like
They had trainings.
because with
they had classes.
the worst one I saw, one of my mates had a birthday. I don't know if you heard of it, like Schnitz and Tits.
Oh
That-
yeah.
I fucking hated it. It was, but that's the like they
What
like.
a name.
Yeah, I know it's terrible, but it's
No,
just
I mean it does exactly what it needs to do.
no. But like,
You remembered it,
well, I'm not going back there because I was like,
but you remembered it.
I was
That's all that
literally
has to be
like,
is memorable.
the food better be good. It was absolutely
The
shit
schnitzel better
house.
be. If
Yeah,
you're,
that's what I was
if
like.
schnitzel's
I'm
in your
like-
name, it better be good.
Yeah, it
better
was
be
absolutely terrible.
Oh no!
The whole place was rank. I'm like, I'm never coming here.
no.
Like, I'm like, oh, if the food's good, I'm like, whatever. I can ignore the like weird, creepy
At least you
atmosphere.
nail the schnitzel.
Yeah, and I'm like, these
At
are big-
least you nail the
I could
schnitzel.
see them. They're like, they've done this like an hour ago. They've all just been sitting there. These these guys are buying expensive beers. They're staring at the women's tits. They don't care about the food.
Right, the business model isn't the schnitzel.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Imagine that. And then I'm like, oh, just give me good food. Like, I don't care.
They're like, how dare you expect good schnitzel?
yeah, I
here.
know. That's what I mean. I'm like, bro.
You even the other part of the name. You know?
yeah, exactly, right? Like, at least somewhat.
That's the question though. Were the tits good?
Yeah, but
That's it. So at least 50% of it was worth it.
Okay,
but like, I don't even know what our original point was now. Like, I've kind of trailed
I know
off
we
a
went
little
off
bit.
because I started
yeah.
telling the story about like being on set with
yeah. No, but it gave me a question as well.
Leonardo
like,
DiCaprio. That's how we got
Yeah,
there. Predator. and
how
Prey.
else do you get to
dating
strip
the
clubs?
23-year-old. Yeah. But tell me a bit more about like how did you guys came up with the idea to go to that location? What's involved? Like because I know that there are a lot of licenses and security and police announcements for like when you go to a location, especially to a place like that. I'm pretty sure there were a lot of paperwork, a lot of process involved.
Yeah. The harder ones are the harder ones are where you're shooting in a known place. My favourite version was we shot in Parliament Station.
Oh,
We shot one of the platforms down there.
yeah.
I think it was something like $8,000 for maybe an hour and a half.
Oh wow.
And the amount of paperwork, the amount of security and paperwork, you wouldn't believe. It literally outside of the frame. So we had a guy who's sort of sleeping, and then the train comes past, and he gets up and all this sort of stuff. Literally outside of the frame is like 4 security guards on either side of the shot.
Yeah.
And then every possible entry. So you're having to pay for all of that, and you're having to there's the paperwork around it is wild. You have to delineate everything, who's going to be there, times, everything.
Yeah.
And we were only there again for an hour and a half. I think it was 3 setups, maybe.
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
Wait,
Yeah.
but if you are there only for an hour and a half, does that include everything like setting up, lighting, shots, or everything?
Generally, in those sort of time frames, you're setting up as much as you can offset, so you can walk it onto set. So
Right.
I can't remember if the DOP had everything set up, but during the rest of the shoot, he did. So I would imagine it was already done.
Yeah.
We used mostly prac lighting. So it was mostly. I think there might have been 2. From memory, there might have been 2 off-camera lights, but most of it was the stuff in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you generally want to set up as much as you can off the camera and away from the place that you're paying that much for.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So what would be the most difficult place to get the licenses for?
That's definitely one of them.
Yeah, okay.
Anywhere that's got notoriety, anywhere that people would know,
I see.
is really hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that you have to think about when you write the script
Without
as
a
well,
doubt.
right? Like, I want to have a scene on top of the.
That's another
the
one
building,
young
yeah.
filmmakers do quite a bit of. I'm gonna have Crown Casino in it. No, you're not. You're
Yeah.
not gonna
Yeah.
have it. You just you're not gonna get it. They're not gonna give it to you. You have to be even bona fide TV productions here have a hard time getting those, and they won't write them into it. They'll write them into it where it's the background, Like you can shoot on Burke Street and shoot towards Parliament, but shooting on Parliament steps or in Parliament, well, when?
Different story.
When are you going to do it exactly? Because they're not going to shut down for you for a day to come in and do your interiors during the day. So you'd find someone that looks like it maybe, but don't write places that you can't get. But that again comes into the whole writing aspect of it. Like someone very early on told me we were complaining about the cameras that we got given. We got given these little Sony PD 150s. I'll never forget it because they were shit house. And we knew too because we had people that were getting other cameras at other institutions or what. We knew what was on the market. And one of the lecturers came to us and said, again, the genius is what can you do with what you've been given? That's a parameter. What can you do with this? And then we were like, oh shit, yeah. And of course he was playing us.
That's like the other side of it, right? So, you can make something
but he gave us a good story. He gave us a really good story. So work within your parameters. Okay, what's your budget? How many days of shooting? How many principals? How many locations?
And we had a conversation about Paranormal Activity.
Oh,
they shot that movie on a shitty camera. It cost them like $50,000 to make that movie. And went on to like gross like $10 or $100 million or something ridiculous.
There's multiple examples of that, but that's again leaning into the medium and leaning into the parameters. Like, what are your constraints? Lean into the constraint.
Let's dive into the story structure. So, what was the structure that you used when you first started as a writer, the screenplay writer, and how did that change over time now that you have worked as a script doctor for other screenplayers?
When you say story structure, there's only three. There's like a classical structure, an anti-classical structure, and then a no structure. So an absurdist film might be an instance of a no structure. Anti-structure is usually it has a relationship to classical structure. So it uses the same expectations and then it subverts them in some way. Usually classically with an ambiguous ending. That's classically an anti-structure sort of narrative. I wouldn't say I used any of those early on. I would, and especially early on, I didn't know them well enough to use them. But that's why I went and learnt to use them, because once you learn what they are, you learn how to break them. So that's again comes back to that painting thing we were talking before. You learn the paint strokes of a master in order to learn why they did it, in order to learn why you can use it or not. So you know how to bring it out of the bag. So I was very like all young filmmakers, I was very anti-classical structure. I wanted to write I remember watching Manchester by the Sea and thought, I wrote this film 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure. Because it was all emotive and all personal and all very angsty. And then you realise Manchester by the Sea is this other prolific sort of film, the second half of it. So I like most young filmmakers, I'm breaking the classical structure all the time early on. And then you start leaning into it. And you go, oh shit! There's a reason there's a reason this works so well, and it goes well beyond like kowtowing to formality and kowtowing to tradition. It goes well beyond it. You realize, and then you start like I did a BA in cinema and English. I did minors in like mythology and history, and you start looking at how symbolism tracks, and then you pick up someone like Joseph Campbell's book, Hero with a Thousand Faces, and you realise, oh shit, we've been doing this the whole time. We've been doing this structure the whole time. There's nothing that escapes it. And there's a reason why we have it. It's a useful function for something else. It's a proxy for something else that we're doing. So you start leaning into the structure more and more, and then you realise, oh shit, it's all this structure. Anti is just a version of classical, and non is, it can be nothing, but it's also something. So they're all kind of bastard stepchildren of classical structure in the end.
So if a lot of movies follow these structures, how can a director or a screenplay writer make the movie different from one and another?
The need to be different is something you have to address first and foremost. because that screams to me that it's a psychological thing. I need to be different. I need to be seen as different. You're introducing yourself into the process. So why do I need to show you that I'm different?
Could it also be just to be seen as well, just to stand out?
But that's a psychological thing.
That's like the one thing I would think of would just be like,
No,
I
without a
just want to be
doubt. Yeah.
seen. Right.
But if that's part of the process, then we have to build it into the process. We have to discuss about why it is, because that becomes part of the fabric of it. So if you need to extricate that, it's like that when I was talking about that rom-com earlier, she needed the ending that she wanted because it was helping her work through something.
Yeah.
So you're building in yourself as a writer, and that's fine. Do it. Tell your story, but know that you're telling your story, because then we can work with it.
Yeah.
Then we can start,
Getting into it and working it out.
and we can embolden it. If you want to have this story of like, if we want to do this rom-com where the ending's down and we're telling a story about crisis and all this sort of stuff, let's fucking work with it then. Let's build it. But if you don't know that you're doing it, we can't work with it.
Wow. Okay.
So there's going to be an element there.
Yeah.
And we have to address it. I mean, we often separate the writer from the work and we do all this sort of shit. But the reality is art's like this endeavor of I think Hemingway said it again. He's sitting down and bleeding. Like that's really what it feels like a lot of the time when you're doing the personal stuff.
You need a bit of self-reflection, right, to kind of understand what you're getting into. Well, whether or not you understand it, that could be another thing to get into as well, because like you said, whether the person they're writing it's themselves would understand if that's what they're actually doing it, right? They don't know if it's like, oh, I'm actually getting out my feelings onto the page.
The good writers I know, and I was working with a novel writer recently, and she's very well aware of why she's writing. She leans into the David Fincher sort of school of perversion. She's like, it's all perversion. It's all us trying to extricate our perversions. And she knows it. She's so well aware of it, and she leans into it with her writing, and it's fantastic. So in that respect, she's completely self-aware, and she's using the craft to engage that discussion in that way. So understand that, but I will also again lean back into what I was saying earlier, which is it's a craft and a business as well. Why do you want to make it?
Well, obviously, a lot of directors and screenplay writers, I think the glamour of being in a film industry, the money,
that's one of
the
my
fame.
favorite. That's one of my favorite things that ever happened to me. So really early on, I was making a film here, and there was a festival, and it was a local festival, and I was really nervous. I think it was my first time directing a piece, and I got invited to the festival, and I got invited to screen there, and I was like shit in my pants. And I was like, oh, this is really this is serious, and they had 3 other films playing. And they put my film at the end, and I thought, well, it's an interesting choice. Are they trying to hide it? Because where you run in a festival and all that sort of stuff, that's all politics, and you know that. Yeah. And there's a reason why they do it and all this sort of stuff. So they put me at the end. I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I get to the screening night, and I rock up, and there's a green room where they've got all the filmmakers sitting there talking before the stuff starts. And they're all older than me, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? These are bona fide filmmakers, blah, blah, blah. And I'm getting really, really nervous. And I'm talking to them about film, and they're sort of talking in roundabout sorts of way about film. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm talking really much more about craft and about narrative and all this sort of stuff, because I'm right in it. I'm doing a degree in it, and I'm really interested in talking shop with other filmmakers. And they're kind of dancing around it. And I was like, this is an interesting state. And then the screening time happens, and and they start showing the films, and they're terrible. They're terrible. The first 3 films, I was like, why would you show this to anybody? Like, why would you even release this for anybody? And then my film comes up, and it's okay. It's not great, but you can see what it's trying to do. It's not okay. It's an okay film. And they rushed to me afterwards. Was that yours? Blah blah blah. And they, and the other 3 filmmakers, the directors especially, that's when I start noticing they're very proud of the fact that they got screened, and they're very proud of the fact that they've called themselves a filmmaker. And I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but a lot of people are in the game to say that they're in the game. They're not really there. They're not interested in the other stuff, and that's okay. That's fine. But again, be clear, because you get found out pretty quick.
Yeah.
The real technicians and the real guys, they're going to be able to have the conversation about the other stuff. But from my experience, and that was a really that really elucidated it very much for me, that those guys were there to be called filmmakers.
Yeah.
They weren't there to make good films. They were there to be called filmmakers. And that's okay. But don't get in my way of making some good shit.
Oh, that's fair.
Which is strange as well. Like, if that was like out of 4 people, it's like 1 out of 4, which is kind of weird to look at. Do you reckon it's like they're kind of the odds on it, or do you reckon it's that was maybe a bit of an odd showing for that?
I would say it's very, very, very prominent early on.
Okay.
But then when it gets to doing the hard work, you get filtered out.
They get filtered. Yeah,
You
that
get
makes
filtered
sense.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the guys who are genuinely making their 9 till 5 doing this sort of stuff, they've got no time for those guys.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
It's kind of good in a good way, I guess. Like, it's
Without
like
a doubt.
these
Yeah.
people probably shouldn't be in it to
Yeah.
begin with. Right?
There's definitely people who like being in the game for that reason, but they also are probably
They
proficient in
understand.
something
They
else.
understand.
Like
a
that
little bit.
casting agent knew her power, like knew her power in swaying the thing, and so the title becomes her identity in some respects. But yeah, those guys get filtered out the higher you go up. There's still guys there in the mid tier. There's still guys there doing their own thing, and
Yeah.
I know one guy especially. I remember working with this one director, and it was clear that he was doing this to get back at a girl.
Yeah.
A breakup film.
No. Being a filmmaker.
Oh,
Yeah, really strange. Like clearly
revenge career.
someone he either wanted to be with or rebuked him or something had said to him, made it a chide about him being a director.
You'll never make it, or you'll
something
never do
like
it.
that.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
a serious professional,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a family member, because I remember having the conversation with him when we were having coffee one day, and he said something. I kind of did a double take on him. I'm like, "You motherfucker, you!" And this is a guy who's directed stuff. He's directed TV ads. He's directed
Oh,
all
okay.
sorts. Serious guy, and he's good. He's good.
Yeah.
But clearly, this thing is still hanging around. And I was like, "Fuck, are you doing all of this to get back at a chick?" It is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's on like the personal side.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird.
Yeah.
That's
And
like
he
what
might
can
not have
drive
addressed
people.
it.
Yeah.
He might not have ever addressed it, and I might just have caught
Just caught
the
on.
edge of it and
Yeah.
gone.
Because that's what I
"Oh,
mean.
this
Some
ain't-"
people don't really self-reflect like that, which
No.
I find weird. Because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I
And
feel
he's
like
one
I
of
do
those
it.
guys.
I do it too much, where it's just like, oh, he's probably not realised that's what's driven him. Right?
Yeah, and he was a workhorse.
Okay.
So he was very much about, if I can get A, B, and C done, I've bona fide myself.
Yes. Okay.
I've qualified as
Yeah.
this thing. So don't need to think about the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's just wasting energy. Just get around it.
No, that's
Let's
fair
go.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, so out of if we use the odds that we just mentioned, 1 out of 4 directors or filmmakers who actually want to make good movies, and then what would be the future for Hollywood? Like we discussed this at length before, and it seems like nowadays Hollywood is really, really struggling at the box office. A lot of movie came out, lost a bunch of money, massive budget that pay for all the stars that doesn't bring back anything. And it seems like it's happening more and more often as well. And it seems like there is also a lack of original or different movies for the audience. You know, like the independent movie studio that we discussed, the A24 studio, it seems like they are releasing a lot of interesting movies, different movies.
Because
but
they're not big budgets. They're
but
like
not big
5-10
budgets.
million,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
just like putting them out everywhere.
They're playing in the smart space for me. They're still working in a space that makes sense. The big budget stuff is flailing so fucking hard.
Because I think their biggest budget of last year was Civil War. I think it was like 50 million.
50 million.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
spent like
I would-
$150 million on films, and it was like 8 or 9 films all up.
Yeah.
It was. I think
That's
that-
the smart space for me.
I saw like a little graphic someone made. It was I've read one
Yeah.
and all the A24 films, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And what was it? It was like,
So
The Rock was paid as much as
50
like,
million.
Yeah.
as much as like, you know,
The
they
Civil
made
War
3
movie.
mils out of, and
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, that's funny.
I think there's so many elements to that question. There's so many elements to that question. But just from a purely numbers game, you have to acknowledge the fact that gaming dwarfs cinema, TV, and music combined. So when you're looking at creatives, I mean, the most recent example of it is Del Toro working with George R. Martin to do Elden Ring.
yeah.
And
That's
the
what I thought was
popularity
funny.
of
I was
that.
like, oh, why had they get him in there?
And you see it play out. The tapestry and the texture in that game is we've rarely seen
The
something.
names. The names.
Even just the names,
They
yeah,
drive
yeah.
me insane. I'm like, George, just think of a different damn name. They don't all have to start with M.
But that to me is that's the elephant in the room. For
Well, that's-
cinema. Is it they've been where they took off from radio and radio took off from literature. They're being now they're being diminished by gaming.
I don't know how much you know about Kojima of Metal
Little
Gear
bit, yeah,
fame.
yeah.
He's a huge film buff. And literally
Clearly.
in Death Stranding and other games, he's gotten like big guys, Madelson, the guy that was on Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
Louis Sulu, I can't remember her name, who we had in one of the Wes Anderson films.
Leia Seydoux,
Yeah. Like he's had big name actors come in because he loves them. And
That's
he's-
the crossover. Yeah, that's where you see them meshing into each other.
like
because
because the money's there, but it's just
without
fun.
a doubt.
Like he's living out his dream. He's just like
Without a
I've
doubt.
seen his studio. He had like Timothy Chalamet come in and stuff. He's had all these famous people, but it's funny that like there's more money in it, but I don't see as many. Like there's really bad games that are just like, oh come on, and they like bring in like big name actors, but the game's terrible and they don't make any money. But he appreciates film a little bit. Whether Kojima's like. If you ever watch any or listen to any of his stories, they're insane.
there's a different discussion there about the maturation of gaming and where it sits at the moment from a narrative sense. I'm very much interested in that because from a narrative perspective, I think it's very, very mature, and they haven't had the conversation about because it took Hollywood a long time to have that conversation.
Yeah. Definitely.
Long time to understand what the language was, what the utility was, and how best for it to coalesce. So that's why you see, like, for me, the 80s is kind of you see the high watermark of the blockbuster film, and you're Back to the Futures and Predator and all this sort of stuff. You see it playing at its best. It's functioning at its most efficient kind of level. Gaming isn't even in the conversation just yet. They don't even know what I think they don't even know what they're making, let alone how they're making it. Although you do have, like narrative, some people would say, narrative-wise, there are plenty of good, really narrative-driven films. I don't think they're as well executed and consistent as Hollywood has shown it can be over the years.
'cause-
So there's a different conversation happening.
And especially gaming, there's so many different aspects to it as well. Like
the biggest conversation they didn't have, and sorry to interrupt you, but the idea that which comes first, the story or the gameplay?
well, there's even beyond that, like keeping the players involved and
That's
interactive.
gameplay though.
But it can be, but there's something outside. I don't know how much you've played big shooters and stuff, like the season pass, people keeping them engaged. Like it isn't so much about the gameplay, keep them coming back.
You're right.
It's almost like an addictive thing. They like it.
Because
They
a
wanna-
film you watch it once or you watch it 5 times
Yeah.
and it's only 10 hours.
But you're not making more money, right? In a game, if you keep someone invested in a game, like I don't know if you ever played Destiny, but they keep people involved for they've got like a 10-year roadmap. And they're like DLC every year is like $80.
Yeah.
And then they've got the season pass. That's like
that's
another
what I mean
$30.
by the conversation between gameplay and narrative. From a narrative perspective, I'm still curious what the societal function is, because that then determines the art.
Yes, because
Do you know what I mean?
there's been like a battle like that for pretty much since like shooters became big and they've come this big like a money maker. Even sports games are in that same asset where it's like it's a money maker.
Yeah.
They're not worried about like what the actual
It's a
game
TV
itself.
series almost.
Yeah, but even like gaming or sports games especially, like EA are just like we're repainting the game out again for another $100, and people just lap it up and they don't really care about the quality of the game itself. Where like EA is a huge thing. Like we're not going to release like a first person game because people don't love it. But then there's like God of War. They made a really great story. It sold really well, but I don't know if they want to put in the effort to like recreate that story when they can copy and paste a game they've made and make the money.
But it's funny, this still comes back to Aristotle's Poetics. This still comes back to classical discourse on dramaturgy, which is spectacle and tragedy. What you're talking about is spectacle.
Yeah.
You know, how can I continually trap the audience into acknowledging the work for as long as possible?
It's been about 20 years, maybe even longer.
And that's why I kind of mentioned
been.
TV, because TV spectacle primarily. It's episodic narrative that doesn't allow catharsis. It's my issue with television, because television can have catharsis, but it's really hard to pull off. You know, you see it with Breaking Bad's one of the classic examples. Game of Thrones, another one where it just failed. But we're coming back to, again, something that was written by a guy in a toga 2,500 years ago or whatever it was. And we're still having the same conversation about the utility of the thing that we're making, whether it's a written book, whether it's a screenplay, whether it's a game.
Well, it's
There's
still,
the
it's still a
discussion.
very human thing, right? Like, it's still going to affect us in obviously completely different mediums, but it still affects us in like a similar way, right?
But what's the utility of it? Because the underlying thing for me is what's the biological utility? Because we're humans, I'm not going to get too far away from it, but we're efficiency experts. So we only keep around, like my favorite's language. I love how we introduce new words because it has a utility for us. It says this is the best way to describe this thing, so we're going to keep using it. So we prune whatever we don't like. That's why so much of the new the DEI stuff doesn't resonate, because it doesn't have a utility for the vast majority of the group. So I look at gaming and go, what's the utility of it? And then how do we play into that utility to have the resonance? Because what I see in the gaming space a lot now is people are burnt out on the DLCs and the prize boxes and the gamification of it. But what they want is authenticity, and all of it seems to be about, like cinema as well. Cinema's struggling from being authentic. That's why people are starving for it. So what about the authenticity needs to be in the thing that you're making for it to have that utility to the group? Besides the monetary value, besides the audience and stuff, purely from an esoteric, functional. Because that's where I come at it from. I'm trying to come at it from, as there's something in philosophy called first principles. I'm trying to come at it from a first principle, because then as a structuralist I can build from it. It's like going, okay, I'm going to build from as far down the foundation as I can get, and then I know what I'm building up from. So it's not just sitting there having a bit of a wank. Oh, what's the nature of film and all this sort of shit. No. If from a structural point of view, if I know what the first utility is, we can build from there. We can have a discussion. So on a craft level, it's like making a chair. What's the function of the bloody chair? What are you going to paint it?
Hopefully it doesn't fall apart when someone sits in it.
And is it comfortable? I say this to a lot of writers. I'm like, you made a chair, but is it comfortable to sit in? I say it to them all the time, because I'm the guy sitting in it. And if I don't want to sit in your chair, what the what is it, a chair still?
Well, that was another thing I was going to say.
Torture device.
How does that play into the audience, right? Because how do they interact with this thing, and would they even understand why they're interacting with it, or even what they want out of interacting with it? Because I feel like that's the hardest thing for me. Like, we're all different. We've all got different life experiences, different expectations from what we just consume on a daily basis. But with something that maybe is trying to say something, and maybe people just don't want to understand it, don't want to accept it. Like, how do you step over that barrier to get someone that maybe wouldn't normally engage with something a bit more authentic, a bit more like trying to question what's happening? How do you get the audience to normally engage with it? Because I feel like that has been a struggle as well. And
this, I wanted to bring it up at some point, but the Gladiator conversation that we had.
We can roll to that.
This does come into that, does feed into that. The start of the original film invites you into a relationship with the main character. And I to let everybody know, but we had a pre-conversation about this, and we had a bit of a joke about how we redrafted and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, I'll do due diligence, and I'll go back and have a look at both of them and break them down the first 5 minutes. I usually break down by important moments in the script. So I broke them down until the point of the first battle. So they both have first battle scenes within the first 10 minutes. And I thought, okay, that's the screenplay telling us we're in the present, and everything before that's set up. So it's the 5 minutes before that is the setup of the characters, normalizing the universe, and then that's now we're in the present moment. So in the original, he literally spends, and I can get the actual numbers for you because I did them by number. He spends the first at least 2 minutes of it. There's no dialogue, and it's purely a reflection of Maximus's character. He's remembering he does the famous hands through the wheat, and then and if you really pay attention, you really only do this when you stop. You watch him go through the emotional challenge thematically of the film. I would argue that usually a theme is stated within the first 15 minutes, and it's usually stated by a secondary character. In a structural sense, you usually have the main character will get acknowledged, someone else will acknowledge the theme, and then they'll either go with it or go against it, depending on how you want to play it out. I would posit that this first shot of him, he looks down, and they also change the white balance. So in the memory, it's golden, and then when they switch to him, it's very, very blue. So they do this, they qualify the distinction using purely just color, which is fantastic. But what you see is you see him struggling with the memory, struggling to get back into the present, and then he slightly indulges in this bird. Now, again, symbolically, this is why I say characters aren't people. The bird isn't a fucking bird. It's a symbol for hope, and it's a symbol for
freedom.
A little bit for freedom, but in a traditional sense, sparrows are like hope and resilience and these sort of things. I tell you about. There is absolutely a bit of freedom in there as well. He acknowledges this bird, and then he does this thing where he smiles at it, and you know this guy's a romantic. He's remembering something. He's looking through a memory, so he's romanticizing where he's been, and then he has a moment in the present where he romanticizes a bird, and you think, I'm going to follow this guy wherever he takes me.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow him wherever he takes me.
Yeah.
And you're happy to do it.
So,
And then-
sorry, Steve. Before you continue here, I think this is a good point for us to discuss. If you mentioned that the characters are not people, they are symbols. So if we feel the connection with the character at this point of the movie, does that mean that we are connected to the symbol or the message?
Yeah.
So
You're connecting to his excellence. His excellence is a romantic. That's going to be his excellence throughout the whole film. He's going to die for his excellence. He's a romantic. That's why his wife dying is so demonstrable, because you killed a romantic's love interest. How fucking dare you? You know, it's the whole rom-com is built on, the genre is built on us loving the romantic. We love someone that takes the risk to be that vulnerable. This is a man in the middle of a war, and he found the time to indulge in a bird. And this isn't the first 5 minutes of the fucking thing. And that's why we fall in love with him. Inversely, in the second two. The first shot, the first 2.5 minutes, by the way, and I can't believe this is one of those ones where I would have argued heavily for this. The first 2 minutes is them doing the credit roll.
Yeah, of the first film.
Of the first film. So they're introducing all the people who worked on it, but they're also doing this animated version of retelling the whole film in the credits. Why, I've got no idea.
Yeah, I was so confused when I'm like, why is this here?
If I'm going to watch Gladiator 2, probably watch Gladiator 1.
Yeah.
Probably like it.
Yeah, I hope so.
So I know what the film's about, so you didn't need to remind me. So you just wasted 2 minutes.
How long has it been as well? Like 20 years?
20 years, yeah.
So I think you've had a bit of time to watch it.
You're good. We're good. So this is what I can't understand, because again, from a technical level, I don't know why the decision's being made. I can see why they would have done it. I don't know why they did it. So you're going to remind me of a film that I probably love, which sets your rest of your film up for a high benchmark.
That's what makes it worse.
Big mistake. You've now told me this is going to be as good as that. It's clearly not going to be. The second films generally aren't. So you've set the table poorly to begin with.
You've already reminded me of a better movie.
Exactly. So what? Again, why? And then why would you spend 2 minutes of the setup? So the first time I see this character, all I'm thinking of is a guy that's not in the film.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
But then it gets worse. The first shot of the protagonist in the film is it's a really strange low-angle shot of him. They're trying to be economical, so they're putting him in a farm. So they're trying to harken back to him being a blue-collar worker, a man of the soil, we'll say. Convoluted imagery. So he's got 2 chickens in front of him, and then he's got some crops behind him, and he looks like he's been sort of there, but he doesn't look dirty enough for one. He doesn't look like a farm. He kind of looks out of place, if I'm honest. So it's a very strange opening shot. He kind of goads one of the chickens, and the chicken runs off, and then you hear someone off camera say to him, "Be gentle" or something, and you realise, it's probably his missus, and she's having a go at him. So without him having any dialogue, the first connection I've had with this guy is he might be a farmer. If he is, he's a shit one because his wife just told him off how to deal with chickens. It's never addressed, so there's no reaction to it. He acknowledges that he's being a shit farmer. So my first interaction with this character is he's incompetent. He's not of the thing that you want me to be, and I don't know what to make of him. And then the first action he does is, besides getting up, is he runs to her. And she's putting up the washing, and they kind of kiss, and then the bells go off, and they have to go to war. But again, and coming back to the craft and coming back to characterization and writing and all this sort of stuff, and first time writers, the first point of call for your character, this is something I've stuck to. Don't convolute it with conflict, because there's clearly conflict in that first one. We don't know why she tells him off, and we don't know what he's doing there. She wouldn't need to tell him off. She knows that he's mucking around with them, so she doesn't need to say that to him. If he's good at it, then he would say back to her, "They love when I do that," or something like that, and that would make him more approachable. So I try to avoid introducing my character with other characters unless there's a really good reason to do it. And the first element should always explain their excellence. In that first instance with Maximus, we saw his excellence. His excellence is he's a romantic. We got it real clear with that reverse shot of him with the sparrow and the wheat. We got it. We didn't get it with this other one. We didn't get the clarity of excellence. We didn't get the idea of the character. We didn't get introduced to them properly. Yeah. And then the rest of it falters from that. We don't really get introduced to the characters correctly. And I think we talked about this idea that having them, if you had to be economical and you had to introduce those two characters very quickly in order to have the fight, in order for her to die, then have it in a way where they're loving. And the banter between them should have been the romantic part.
Yeah.
Could have set it up in the same...
Not off in the distance.
Exactly.
It's like in a weird scene.
Yeah.
Very weird.
And especially when you've already shown me like a whole other film as well. Like, what are we getting into? Like,
I still don't get that. You set yourself up to fail.
Yeah, because it's just like,
here's
it's
the film
such a
that you didn't watch.
strange way to introduce like... I don't know if it would have mattered if they moved it, but I just think it shouldn't have been there to begin with.
It should have been there to begin with. You should have gone, we're going to wipe the slate.
Exactly. You don't want to
introduce this character
and
we're going to give him his grace like we did with the first film.
Because that's what when I remember watching both of these films, I was like, when I was watching them, I'm like, they're both trying to recapture. The second one's really trying to recapture what the first one did, but does it wrong at every step. Like as you described that first, like him reminding of his home and like where he's coming from. And at the start of the second film, we're already there. We're there with what he is, but you don't really get a good grasp of that either. But like you said, you can instantly tell that he yearns and wants to be back where he was. But with these other guys, he's just kind of joking around. It's not like such a big deal, and we don't know, whatever. It's not like it isn't played as this big thing that he's about to protect his home from invaders. Like it isn't such a thing. It's like we've just met them, and they're already off to fight. Where Maximus is already in the battle, but he's remembering of what he's missing, right?
And again, structurally, there's another mistake that they make, which is Maximus is shown as being proficient. So we can trust that the next sequence of shots is he's clearly a proficient person. Someone finally calls him general, but before that, you're well aware of this. So then it's symbolically, I'm cueing to the audience. You can trust the maturation of this character. You can see he's a positive man. He's not going to have to define himself. He's going to be the stalwart, and the chaos is going to happen around him. You get this very early on. There's a misstep with this other character because he's introduced as having this partner. You assume that they're married, whatever the case may be, but they're together. So he's symbolically, and this is where it comes back to the symbolism of it. Symbolically, he's man enough to have a woman, but he's indecisive and he's not good at the farming. This is within the first 5 minutes. Symbolically, you've confused me. Collectively, he's grown up enough to have a partner, but he's not grown up enough to know how to deal with chickens, even though he's a farmer. And he's not grown up enough to... There's this weird sort of like... in the framing, she's in front of him, kind of leading him a little bit. So if you're going to set up the character as being a bit of a boy, then do it. Don't have her in the piece. She doesn't need to. You could have changed that character for one of his mates. You would have had the same revenge plot. Him and his mate, they're around in the field and they're being boys. You realise there's a little bit of like immaturity about it symbolically. And then he has to go, he's a good soldier. Don't get me wrong. Very good soldier. So that's part of his characterization is that he might be, it's like a good tennis player. It's like a game film. He might be really good at the game, but shit at life, which is what most game films are. They're good at the game, they're shit at life. Play that out. Him and his mate, they're fucking around. They're going to invade. And the really interesting shot selection. They go to the bell rings. They go to the shot of these boats coming in really menacingly. So you've telegraphed to me that these invaders they're good at their job.
Yeah.
They're good at invading.
Yeah.
So this guy's going to be the underdog.
Yeah.
Play the underdog story out prior to that.
Yeah.
If he's with his mate and he's immature, he's an underdog. Why? Because he hasn't come into himself yet. He's not the king. He's the prince.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, symbolically, we can play with these things and we can posit them in a way. So if I started that film, forget the whole animation bit at the start. It's him and his mates. They're f***ing around a little bit, and you get a sense of like, oh, we're gonna follow this guy. He's a happy dude.
He's just like another mate that we're like hoping does better, and
And he's an
achieves
every
something.
boy.
Yeah,
He's the prince. We're going to follow the prince. Oh, he's got to, very early on, he's going to have to show himself, but he shows himself to be a great soldier. And you're like, oh shit, he's really good at this. What's the conflict we're actually going to follow? The conflict that we're actually going to follow is he's not a great dude just yet because he's still coming into his own.
Yeah.
There's your structure for the first half of the film.
And it actually plays into the rest of the film, whatever they're trying to build up.
Thank
right?
you very much.
And,
And
it
that
makes more
leans
sense,
into the Denzel Washington part. He gets taken advantage of by a tyrannical king figure. That's a classical structure. The tyrannical king is one that doesn't allow you to be free and to come into your kingdom. You know, to go from prince to king.
And especially he's literally been taken and made a slave as well. So it's like
This is my point.
without even the
It's the same as
symbology,
the
it
baby
literally
down the
does
river.
it. Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
same structure. He gets sent down the river. That's him being put in the cage and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So again, you've got those classical structures available to you to play out.
Yeah.
You know, you can use them.
Yeah.
That to me just speaks to either it's no care. No care in the process, no care of the product. And I think we had a quiet conversation about this and we won't go too much into it, but this idea that there's a lot of money laundering in the industry now that I hear about, and that they're just making these things in order to get money moved around. And so why do they care? Because it's not really the reason they're doing it. So we're looking, you know, as cinephiles, we're looking for cinema to help us make meaning of things. And the industry is like, we're not interested in that at all.
Yeah, because you can like, what's it searching for? Like that's when I watched the second Gladiator, I feel like it had dot pointers like, oh, we've got to hit this, 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 but no like roadmap or any cause and effect. They're kind of like, he's going to fight the Romans. Okay. Oh, he's going to have a revenge story. Okay. His wife or his partner there. Okay. Now he's captured. Now he's got to be jovial and make friends with all the gladiators because he's got to be the leader at the end. That doesn't really pay off. He's going to have like, the guy that's running the gladiators and he's going to be the bad guy. He's going to have to come over across. Don't really see that till like the end. Him being the like prince, literally the prince coming in next in line. That really doesn't get used that well.
Not at all.
And it's like so many, and him being Maximus's son as well. It's like, this is like a big thing and it doesn't really and he uses it at the end and I'm like, why are you using this?
Yeah.
Like
The
what
better
is this?
version of that story is that if he's Maximus's son, he's out in the wild and he has to make a man
Because they
of
do have a
himself.
flashback as well of him they run away and then it's just a little kid running off and I'm like, okay, I see what they're trying to do here.
Yeah.
But that would have been like even a good starting point if him being a young kid just escaping from after all the calamity.
I
that
would
happened
have
in
done
Rome.
the second half of the Lion King version of it. Where he goes out into the wild and he declines declines the call to action.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't want anything to do with Maximus, his whole thing, Rome.
And he can run into this mate or whatever, and this is like he builds this relationship with him or whatever, and then it leads back to the start.
And
of the film
then
or
that's
whatever.
that's an actual organic way to him for him to get where you need him to go. But whatever.
In this all of two, it just feels like no, this is happening. This is happening.
It feels like point of the map writing. Do you know what that is? Two types of writing where you write. A lot of writers will write with the ending in mind, and then they'll write backwards. That's kind of the way I usually write. I want them to know what I want. I want to know where I'm going.
It's like how I do a maze. I'm like,
And then there's point of the map writing, which is like George R. R. Martin stuff, where he's like, I need one of the Lannisters to go from the capital to
King's Landing
to the wall.
Yeah.
And this is going to happen when they get to the wall, and this is what happens in King's Landing. And then he goes, we're just going to. We'll get him to go to the Harren Hall and they're going to have some fun here and then he's going to go to here. And
he doesn't really think it out. Like, it's funny. I've seen some of the stuff where he really doesn't think that deeply into things, but it's how the character would react in that situation. How he builds up that character. It's like, this is what would happen.
And that goes back to spectacle writing. Spectacle writing doesn't change the character as such. Like he had a really interesting, to completely go off topic here. It's not really it's TV. But he had Jaime Lannister was one of the most interesting characters in that series, and he had a really interesting
growth
point where he could have paid off that character in the end, And the fact that he goes back to
what he was.
Cersei and they die together is one of the most abhorrent misuses of symbols I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You literally cut this guy's hand off, which changes his character wholesale because this is his bread and butter. And you're telling me the cutting of the hand didn't change him as a man.
Didn't change it. Because the books aren't finished, but I'm literally up to him in one of his chapters recently, and it's literally showing his change. Like the people he loved and cared about, he's like, I don't really.
Exactly.
Who are these
Yeah.
people? Like he's like, why do I really
Because
respect
change
or
should
want to
make
be?
you a different person.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like obviously, the Game of Thrones TV series has gone through a whole lot of a mess compared to like whatever will happen with the books. But once they lost like the main material, and the guys were like, we're just kind of like.
But didn't he know? Didn't he have the whole
Because
thing outlined?
George R. Martin gave him like kind of like what he wanted for each character and what they ended. But it feels like they're just like, okay, that's going to happen, that's going to happen, that's going to happen. And that's why season 7, 8 and that, they're just kind of like dominoes falling over and no real why it happened. It's just like, okay, that's going to happen, it's happening. This is going to happen, that's happening. And you notice it a lot.
Bastardization.
Yeah.
Of the material.
And I think that's what scared him off of continuing this story because he's like, these were like kind of where I wanted to go, but the audience hated it. But I feel like it's
They
different.
were going to hate it anyway. The funny part is with his career, he's anti-classical.
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
openly anti-classical.
I think it's all. I don't. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's hard to like. I think a lot of people get upset with endings. No one's going to be ever happy. But whether
But
or
you
not
put yourself into a corner though.
Yeah, that's
because
what's
and,
hard.
and we again was something we talked about previously. Is like if you're writing your politics into the piece, you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Martin is classically anti-hero.
Yeah.
He's classically anti-classical. So he writes. That's why Jamie is who he is. He hates, and I feel like it's the nerd at school. He's trying to write the anti-hero because he's like, F you for like bullying me and shit. Like you're working out your own psychology in there.
Yeah.
I feel like Jamie is like the guy he met in high school and he gets to cut the guy's hand off in his fantasy.
because he does that at a lot of his stories that he's also written in this world. There are a lot of those kind of characters where they're like heroes, but they're not really. Like there's a lot more going on, or something happens to them and they've changed.
It's like he's trying to tell us, oh no, there's heroes that you don't think are heroes, and I'm one of them, and I'm like, oh fuck off.
Well, he is. He has said he's like Sam, one of the characters, is meant to be like a self-insert for
Without
him.
a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's admitted that. So he isn't like so oblivious to it. But it is interesting because they are still interesting in like characters and growth and stuff. But you're right about like projecting kind of like your own view on things into your creation.
I don't mind it. Like, don't get me wrong. Do it.
No. Yeah.
But you've got to live with the consequences, and the consequences are traditionally, if you're anti-classical, the ending is going to be almost impossible to land.
Yeah. And I
Like,
think
how do you write it?
And that's the hard thing as well. Whether or not I'm correct, that's why he's scared off finishing the book series.
I would be.
Yeah, I know. I can see it. That's what I would
I'm
assume.
like, what book? What are you talking about?
But it's just like, that's what it's like been, I think it's like 12 or 13 years.
Oh, it's been too long.
Yeah, and he's literally like, yeah.
It's got to be hanging over him something.
Everyone's
hard.
like, I've even been like, he's going to die before it even finishes.
That,
So.
it wouldn't surprise. That's like the Tom Cruise thing.
Yeah.
He wants to go out in his shield.
Yeah.
I was still writing the book.
Yeah, he's like, it was good. It was going to be good.
But have you thought about how clever it is? He got the focus group, the ending of his book, using someone else's platform.
Yeah.
Without ever having to write it.
But whether or not he's going
Talk about the biggest cheat.
It is, but that's what I mean. It's also scared him off to be like, I'm probably not going to finish this now, like my initial story in this world.
And he's probably written himself into such a corner.
I haven't.
How do I get out
I'm
of
up to
this?
the second last book in the thing. There's one more I've got
Do
to
you
go
like
before
his writing, by the way?
I don't mind it.
It's not great.
It's not like the greatest thing,
No.
but like I do like his characters and like the
characterizations
characters
are
are really
fun.
great and
Yeah.
like you're rooting for whatever is going on with his
That leads me to
character.
believe he's a point on the map writer because much like Stephen King, Stephen King has the best propensity to write a really nice character and then go, okay, now what can I do with the character? I don't know what to do with it. And that's another thing I'd say to early writers is know what style of writing that you do and then try to shore up your weaknesses because there's always going to be one. That if you're a point of the map writer, your execution for structure is going to be lesser. But if you're a structuralist and you're running backwards, your characterizations are usually weak. That's my fault. My characterizations sometimes are a bit too elusive and they don't sometimes ring true. So that's what I work on when I'm going back and editing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've got to go back and make sure there's a point of connection to the character. So I look at stuff like the Gladiator one. I go, okay, how can I put in just a little bit of authenticity in there, get them really nice and focused on the character. He says there's 3 types of motivation for a character. He says there's personal motivation, there's interpersonal motivation, there's extrapersonal motivation. Your personal motivation is why you do it. The interpersonal motivation is what you tell your mates about why you did it. And then what you would say on camera is your extrapersonal motivation. That's communal motivation. When those 3 align, you see magic happen. So when you're watching something, ask yourself next time, what's their motivation and which type of motivation is it? You know, he's personally motivated or any of this sort of stuff. They're always engaging in all 3 all the time. Always. You have to acknowledge those 3 motivations in whatever the scene might be, because that'll genuinely tell you about the stuff as well. So let's take the opening to Gladiator yet again. His personal motivation is he wants to get back to his wife. His interpersonal motivation is in that scene he's very well aware of his troops, which is a lovely bit of kit when they're writing that out. Lovely use of it, where he walks up and he gives the guy the handshake and they're all smiling to him. They call him general and all that sort of stuff. You get the interpersonal motivation is, and he says it. It's one of his first lines. He says, "Lean and hungry," and you're like, "Oh, he's so connected to his troops, even though he's the general. He's a benevolent ruler. He's a benevolent ruler of this army." So you get the interpersonal kind of motivation. The extra one is a really interesting one. The just before the fight,
the messenger.
The messenger. He says to him, "Will they fight, General?" And he goes, "We will see." He doesn't engage in the extrapersonal. He declines it. He declines to project forward. He's a man of the moment. Again, reinforcing this idea that he's a romantic. He doesn't care about what could possibly happen. He only wants to enjoy what is happening. Again, written to the subtext of the dialogue. You know, those 3 motivations in the first fucking 3 or 4 lines of his dialogue, you've got everything. You've got all the plate set for you. You're good to go. So that's, again, I'd say to any writers, look at your motivations, look at what level of motivation they're working on, and how do you express the others to make sure that you're covering all your bases. Because we want to know. I want to know what you're thinking about, what you're going to tell me, but also what everyone else gets to see.
Exactly.
That's your engagement level for that character. And so, often with Martin's stuff, we don't get some of those elements cooked in, and that's where I feel it's a little bit thin.
Because he tries to delve into more like they're all like don't understand sometimes what they want. And like I said, a lot of it is through monologue. So a lot of the communication is through their thoughts. Because they'll literally be like, they'll be talking to him and be like, oh, he's talking to Steve. And then in his head, he's like, I really don't like Steve. Why am I talking to him? And that's like a conversation.
Are you trying to tell me something?
I was literally...
I can believe you.
But I was literally like, there was Brienne, one of the characters.
Did we get some lunch?
Brienne was literally talking to a character and she's like, and she's in her head's like, I really don't trust this guy. I don't know if I should be talking to him or like giving him money for information, but she keeps doing it anyway. And she's like, oh, but with steel, she'd be like, and she'll like touch her sword or... gesture is like, you do me wrong, and like grabs him. So there's like the cause and effect, but then all these characters very, very rarely are like expressing their like actions straight out. They're always thinking about like, what's the other character thinking? What are they involved in? Can I trust them? That's like a part of how he deals with his world is like everyone's kind of at conflict.
And I think it's one of the things we're struggling with at the moment when we talk about authenticity is a lot of the actions driven by melodrama, which is the opposite of authenticity, which again, which is what we're struggling from now, is this idea that you see it a lot, and it's my favourite at the moment, the trauma dumping in dialogue.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm here and exactly what was wrong and what I ate last week and why my dad hated me. And I'm like, what the fuck does this have to do with any of it? Has nothing to do with any. That's weak writing. And that's a classical hallmark of immature writing is you haven't. Elegance, they say, is when you've got nothing left to take away. Not nothing left to add, but nothing left to take away. You've said exactly what you needed to in the least amount of... and this is what I say to a lot of writers, don't steal from the audience. Don't steal their time, don't steal their emotion, don't steal any of that sort of stuff. That's why, again, when we were talking earlier about know why you're writing, know what you're asking for. Don't steal from them.
That even plays in the Gladiator too. Why are you showing the first Gladiator film at the start of your new film that you...
To justify the ticket price.
Yeah, and it's just like crazy. It's like, why are you doing this?
that's
Yeah.
again another one of those things we're again suffering from in this current climate, and that leads to a conversation you and I have had much deeper about the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah.
That's a different type of writing. Masculine prose is very lean, and it doesn't do a lot of introspection. It's action driven. So famously Hemingway wrote a whole book without ever using a verb or something. I think there's no descriptor, and that's purely masculine writing where it's all connecting. It's kicking over another thing and it's connecting dots. And then you've got the feminine narrative, which you see a lot of these days. Like my favorite example is the last 3 Star Wars films. It's a masculine universe written in a feminine way. Rey is always. Even that. Who's the stormtrooper? Finn.
Yeah.
Even he's classically female. He keeps on telling you that he's struggling with the fact that he was a stormtrooper.
They don't even use it that well anyway.
And it's not used anywhere. That's the best version of it, is where it never pays off because it doesn't need to, because we told you what exists. It doesn't. It exists to be itself. He's perpetually dealing with the fact that he's got this history. Where imagine that character without having discussed that at all. Imagine you play it out instead. Imagine you play it out where he has to try to convert another stormtrooper, and you never hear about him talking about it, but he tries to do something about it. Masculine prose versus a feminine prose. So what we're struggling with at the moment is, and there's no right or wrong here, don't get me wrong, but what we're struggling here is the over-feminization of structure and prose and writing. Is we've leaned really heavily into trying to justify the characters' thoughts. Not even their actions, just their thoughts. I don't need you to justify their thoughts. I don't like them. I don't like them. Why would I? Not even do I not like them. I don't know them. It's like I wouldn't. And getting back to the realism of it, I wouldn't ask you. Like if I just met you, I wouldn't ask you why you're wearing jeans, and you wouldn't tell me. You'd say, "What the fuck are you?"
I just like jeans. Leave me alone.
So there's no symbol for this. There's no symbolic reason why this should exist anywhere. There's no symbol for this to exist.
And I want to dive into the idea of the characterization of feminine and masculine characters. So in the 3 Star Wars movies, you mentioned that the writing is a bit more feminine. Can you dive? So can you dive into that a little bit more?
Sure.
Are you talking about the characters? Or are you talking about the stories? Or are you talking
all across the board?
Okay.
It permeates. The form often follows the function. So the writing itself, it can be, the words on the page can be in a sentence structure. They can be masculine or feminine. So again, the lack of use of verbiage is very masculine. And that extends out to how the characters are designed. So and the biggest criticism of Star Wars is, of course, that she's a Mary Sue character. A Mary Sue character is a feminine character. Why? Because their actions don't breed a consequence and a change. The masculine's interested in progress. The feminine's interested in understanding. Yes, sometimes you'll get with the masculine film no understanding. It purely shows you, like 1917 is a good one of that. Which is, who's that?
The Christopher Nolan's one.
Like
the war movie.
And also Sam Mendes one. What was the one that he made, the one-shot one? It's not, no, Nolan's is Dunkirk.
No, 1971. Yeah, I've watched that film.
Dunkirk,
I don't know who it was, but yeah, it's like
Mendes is Sam.
That's the one that was like meant to be the one shot, like following
that's Sam Mendes.
Following the soldier through. Yeah,
that's overly masculine. Because you never really understand the characters. It's purely a follow these guys all the way through.
Well, it's all in the moment, right? It's all happening, and you don't.
And it's
have
all
time.
action based.
There's not much time for retrospect at all, really. There's like a couple of moments.
There could be, but he's leaning into it, completely leaning into it. And again, that comes from the writing. That comes from what's the function that you want and what's the form that's gonna take. So then you get the opposite of that, which is 2 people in a room and they're gonna talk for an hour and a half. They don't go anywhere. They don't move. Nothing happens. That's hyper feminine writing.
I was just, as you said that, lighthouse popped into my head. I know it's not a room, but they're stuck in a lighthouse. I know there isn't quite. It's hard to describe in what it's like. What's trying to be said with this film, but it isn't like so much words. But it's 2 men trapped in this like
without
island.
a doubt.
Yeah.
I would almost argue that film is one man talking to himself.
Yeah, that's not far off either, really. But like, there's a lot of play
and that's
in
often,
it as well.
and that's often again coming back to characterization. A lot of the time, I'll look at a screenplay and go, there's 5 characters here. They're actually one person having a discussion with themselves. That's a classical, classical philosophical. Plato did that. He would have a character talk to another character so they can discuss an idea. So often I'll break down a screenplay and I'll go, okay, these 5 characteristics are having an argument with themselves to try to work out which is the best move forward. And you see it play out in some films. You know that animation where they're all in the girl's head? And then
Inside Out. Yeah.
That's the classical version of that, where you take the characteristic, you take the excellence of the character, and then you express it as a character, and they get to have an argument about which excellence is best. Anger, hate, love, this sort of shit.
Sadness,
So when you look at a film and you go, Sam in Game of Thrones, he is the he's sort of a classical archetypal curious character, but he lacks any physicality about him.
He's the opposite of every other character in Game of Thrones.
And why is he the best partner to Jon? Because it's literally what is it? Who's the famous example? There's a famous double. He's the fat man to the skinny man. The funny man to the straight man. Classical. He just took, and that's the really thing that bothers me. He used classicism, but he doesn't like classicism. And Jon and Sam are a great pairing. We love watching them on screen.
Yeah, exactly.
Because symbolically they're having a discussion about the thing that we are. You're trying to be both a thinking man and an acting man.
And it's even how because Jon at that point when he first meets Sam, he's kind of questioning his own beliefs.
Exactly.
Because he's going through his own challenges. And even letting kind of talking and making friendship with Sam is something maybe he wouldn't have done. This is very early in the story. But he's at a point where he's like, no, I shouldn't just judge this character for being
and he's also being revealed as being a bit of a fraud. With McAllister or whatever his name is, the guy that's goading him when they're first there.
Yes,
And also Tyrion plays a really interesting part in that.
Tyrion says
I think
to
that's
him,
why he
questions
how
it a bit.
dare you? You wouldn't, you had a man at arms. These guys have never picked up a sword. And Jon's like, I'm a fraud. So then they bring in Sam, and Sam is revealing of his. He's a personification of the weakness, having an argument with itself. And they're continually having this argument of Sam's like, I don't want to fight anybody, and Jon's like, you have to do something, dude. You have to do something.
This is what it's asked of you, and like whether you do it or not, it's gonna come down on you no matter what.
So in a writing sense, you're investigating the idea by having 2 characters play out, and that again, not my idea. That's the character expressing the action because you need it to happen. But then the lower layers of that idea are that a character is an expression of an action, and an action is an expression of an ethic, and an ethic is the expression of a theme. And that's how you write. You write from theme into ethic into action, action into character. So when people say, and it's one of my favourite pet peeves of writing, is that they go, it's a character-driven narrative. Like you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Because characters are expressions of actions. And actions are expressions of ethics, and ethics are expressions of themes. There's no such thing as a character-driven narrative.
What are you really trying to say? It's not again, the characters are just symbols, right? So what are you really want to say?
Why did you use that symbol? Why did you make
exactly?
The
What's the
here?
purpose? What's the purpose?
What's the purpose of it?
Because
and that in that way, the character-driven narrative can't exist because characters aren't
the real.
Then they're not their own thing. You have a character-driven narrative if you put a character in a white room, naked, not even naked. If it was just a headshot, maybe, I don't even know how you even pull this off. But if there was no other elements, then you could argue that it's a character-driven narrative. But location is as important as character is. As important. If not more so. Because if I take Maximus and he's not in the war front, and he's in a loft in a farm, it doesn't matter what the character's doing. He's not fighting the Germans. Do you know what I mean? Like all the context is non-character specific. And he's interacting in that. So again, see how the action builds the character. I need there to be a conflict between a romantic and a hedonist. This is what this film is really about. It's a hedonist versus a romantic. This guy does it for himself and this guy does it for the other people. That's the true conflict in that film.
And what does he do when he loses that? Because he loses that early on in the film, and it's like, where does he go from here now? Because that's like,
can you still be a romantic? The film is, can you still be a romantic in a harsh world?
Because that's his kind of challenge in the later half of the film is, can he like
For it take every reason for you to stop being romantic, can you still die as a romantic?
Because he finds
it's an amazing bit of fucking. That's an amazing theme.
Because
can you still have a heart?
Because he instead of romanticizing about his family, he romanticized about Rome being a better place. That's kind of like his idea, right? He's like, for the people. He
says it should be better.
Yeah, exactly. That's the new thing he's being romantic about.
And he can kind of resurrect his wife. The wife is a symbol of how beautiful Rome can be.
That's what I mean. He's kind of changed. He's like alignment because he's lost it.
Yeah.
And
Again,
that's what I mean.
symbolically. So again, is this a character-driven narrative? No, clearly, bloody not. I mean, I'm not trying to be unreasonable about it, but
even if you're, because
it's just a way to look at it.
It is an interesting way to look at it, because that's what I'm trying to think about it. But that's what I mean. Like, you're talking into like these depths of like what a character or how it should be. But like for someone that goes to watch a film and just sees Maximus beat some people up, they're not like, oh, this is like.
No, but that's the game.
Because as you're saying it, I understand, because that's how you build a character, make it believable. This is why you believe all these actions and stuff. But I can understand maybe a normal person wouldn't like.
No, I'm not talking to the normal person. They're just they're hoping what I can get at the end. But that's the real fun of it. My metric for everything I do. So my dad's a bricklayer. Loves a Western. I'll do a Western eventually, but he's a bricklayer and loves a Western. I show him all of my films, early drafts, to see if I've nailed it or not. He is my litmus test. If I can build in all those layers that we're talking about, but I can execute it in a way where a bricklayer can say to me, not bad. I've done my job.
I see. I see what you mean. Because what I usually see is like,
that's the game.
So sorry, and you know, like in the beginning, like when you watch a movie, like the first thing that you see are the images, right? So the images is like the external of the theme. You know, in this case, it's war, it's battle, it's people fighting in the Colosseum. Those are the spectacles. But I think after the second viewing, you start noticing things. Why did he look at that bird? Why does he always want to come home? Why does he want to continue? So those are the underlining layers, and this is why good movies require multiple viewings.
Sure.
But
it's often the thing that I get the conjecture about. People aren't really watching films like that. And I'm like, the game is that they don't need to.
No. Like, I understand. Like,
I want them not to have to watch it the second time if I've done my job really well.
No, but that's the thing, right? You want them to come across and they've like enjoyed it or even gotten what you're trying to get at, right? The point or the whole point of the whole thing. Which, can, like, I feel like it's been a lot of a miss lately in most films, right?
Jesus.
Like, whatever they're ever going for. But that's what's because I was like, that's why I'm trying to follow along with you. And it's like that's what I completely understand that people watching this wouldn't. Like, they probably not understanding the layers to it or understanding from like point A to point B, or even like for you, it's like A, B, C, D and on, which is like, it's very interesting because how from like the ground level up to like floors as you're evolving and like building to this symbol, as you would say it, rather than a character, which is very interesting to see. Because I don't know how many, like, obviously you're probably one of the first people I've talked to that's like, you know, writing a script, writing a character. So it's very interesting to see and how it would play out in a film, right? Whether or not, like, I don't know how many other writers you've talked to and how they would think about their process, but it's very interesting to hear. And it's very interesting to think, even like to put it onto other films I watch and see how that character reacts and how that plays out to what they're trying to get from, right?
If we have 10 different perspectives, it's better than one because you're less likely to miss something. So it's a very good. I only see it as an approach. It's not even a Bible or a guide. It's just it's almost like a filter on a lens. If I put this filter on, what does the image look like, and do I get more out of it? I often liken it to when I've done writing workshops and taught as well. I've said to them, this is my characterization of the argument, which is when I turn on a tap, I don't care how the water got there. I just want to make sure that the water's clean and it's coming out of it. The guys that had to make all of that stuff to get the water out of the tap, they're what I do to make sure the water comes out of the tap.
Yeah, exactly.
That's as simple as it gets. And that's what I want. I want that to be as simple a process as it gets. So when they turn on the tap, the water comes out.
Yeah.
but the engineering and the desalination and all these other games that have to that go into it in the background that have to happen on a technical level for the water to come out the tap. It's an extraordinary thing.
And it to be clean, I guess. Like you can turn on the tap and it can be dirty.
Is it drinkable water?
Or does the tap even turn on?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of things.
That's what I
like
liken it to.
Wrong. Yeah.
They don't want to know about the other stuff, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's the contract we have. Is that the water comes out of the tap clean and I can drink it? That's the contract. Is the film watchable? Is it worth my money? Did I steal from you?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all. The rest of it's purely. I'm talking to the guys who are cleaning the water.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested in that conversation because that's what I wanted to do from when I was little. I wanted to work in that space. I wanted to see how the water was cleaned.
Yeah,
and how did we get the water out of the tap?
And then you went to writing films. I don't know how you got to there.
There wasn't enough work in the water industry. Had a falling out. I actually have a phobia of deep water. I drowned when I was little. There we go.
God.
Wow.
It came right
There you
back
go. Wow,
You're not laughing now, are you?
No, I'm not. Wow, it did come back around. There you go.
Although it did play out nicely. I got over that. A good friend of mine bought me an experience. They had me go dive with sharks.
Oh wow!
And knowing me,
in the cage or like
no. It was it was at the aquarium.
Okay.
They drop you in this tank, but they knew me well enough to know that I would not do it. So they forced me into what do they call it? The therapy where you have to confrontation therapy or whatever it is.
Oh my God!
They forced me into confrontation therapy in order to get over this. I still have a fear of deep water. I'd really like to learn to surf, but I can't because I still have.
Okay.
Yeah, I still can't get into deep water too well.
Oh no, that's fair. Well, that's because it's like the.
Not that you needed to know any of this.
No, I was going to say diving into like irrational fears and rational fears. Like it's not so irrational, right?
No.
Because
and the funny thing is, I got assaulted by 2 sharks when I was in the tank.
Really? Oh
assaulted.
my God.
It smacked me in the face.
Oh my God.
And you weren't supposed to be touched. They were very clear. You're not going to be nowhere near them. They're not going to be at arm's distance as long as you didn't put your hands up.
They can smell it on you.
And as I'm floating down, this shark just comes across and smacks me across the face. So I'm like, I've got to get out of this fucking tank.
They tricked me.
It was wild. It was really, really wild. Yeah.
So probably that's why like the writer of Jaws wrote that movie. Probably had the same
Get over
fear.
it. Yeah.
Without
a doubt.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Generally, you do start with something that you like. Again, going from that like top-down character, action, ethic theme. Often when I'm writing, I'm like, what do I want to talk about at the moment? Like, what's the thing? I wrote this little two-hander between this young man and this woman when they get into a bit of a roadside thing where she's not driving fast enough. He's trying to get to a interview for a job that he's really wanting. She keeps him from getting to the interview. He loses it. She gets him arrested. All this sort of stuff. This idea that sometimes we're being held back generationally because people are living longer. So what's the byproduct of this? The byproduct is all these opportunities for young people are being diminished by our need to be led by geriatrics, where they're getting compressed by it. So that's an expression of a theme. I wanted to talk about thematically this thing. Okay, then what's the best way to express this theme? What's the best way? What's an ethic that can be involved? Then, okay, what are the actions that need to be involved in that ethic? And what are the characters that need to express those actions? That's often how I'll write if I want to talk about something.
Yeah. Before we end the conversation, I think it would be fair for Steve to consolidate his advice for young writers and young screenplay writers. If you want to write a solid screenplay and you want to turn that screenplay into something, what would be your top 5 advice for the
Copy to start off with.
Yep. Just be as much as you can.
When you're early on, like work out why it worked. So copy, but also break down. So be a student of it as well. Don't just go, I'm going to just go shoot because I've got a fun idea. Do that. Definitely have the enthusiasm. It's part of the reason why we met. I went to that group because it reminds me of when I was really hungry. Really hungry for it, and it gives me that same energy. It's purely just vampiric. I'm going in to suck the energy back in. So copy,
Break
study.
Down. Yep, study. Yep.
Remember to be enthusiastic. Remember to love it, and because one of my very early on, I remember going into a TV studio. I remember going into Channel 10, and a guy, a friend of mine had gotten a job there, and I remember it really distinctly. He worked on the news. I was like, this guy's been working 10 years on the news. He's going to have some stuff to say, and he fucking hated his job. Didn't watch, and that was the one thing that really got me. I was like, "Oh, do you watch the program back?" And he goes, "Nah, I never watch it." I was like, "You make a thing that you don't watch."
Yeah.
That always struck out to me. So again, that third one would be understand why you're doing it and understand how to make sure that you can keep on doing it. I've avoided all that stuff to make sure that I'm still in love with it 20 years into the game. Love it still. Think about it all the time. Can talk about it. I love talking about it.
Only a couple hours.
Yeah, just knock out a few. I'm going to go watch the first 5 minutes of Gladiator and break down a sparrow. You know, like that's still me being obsessed, completely obsessed by it. So remember why you did it and why you're going to keep on doing it. 4 or 5, make some money if you can. Make some money if you can. And the fifth one would be really humble about it. Go and sit on other people's sets. I did for years and years and years. Again, I ran coffees for people for 5 years. I see it often with young filmmakers. They want to go straight into being the guy. Don't do it. Set yourself a challenge. Go sit on someone else's set. See what they do wrong. See what they do right. See what it feels like. Don't like it. I wouldn't trust an 18-year-old to tell me a story, let alone write me a story, let alone make me a story. So why would you think you're the exception to the rule? And even if you were the exception to the rule, I would treat that as a challenge in the inverse. I would say, even if my stuff was exceptional, I'm going to go well round my game. And the Spartans used to say you train your weaknesses, you don't train your strengths. You train your weaknesses. I'm a dyslexic writer. I'm heavily dyslexic. I can't read very well at all.
Yeah, neither can I.
Oh, wow.
So I trained myself into ways to make that easier, and I apply my craft in it. Yeah,
Fantastic.
But that's what I mean by training your weakness. So if you don't know structure, go fucking learn some structure. If you don't know symbolism, go go learn some symbolism. Don't play to your strengths all the time. Don't always play to your strengths. Play to your weakness. I don't have much experience on set. Go sit on people's sets. Go do it. Go look at what it looks like to be a filmmaker. And again, the business side of it. Go train that weakness. Again, I was a writer without being the producer. And someone said, you're not going to get it made. So I had to go train the thing that I hate. And I hate it. It's the worst part of the job for me. Because if I could sit in a writer's room, if you said to me, we can sit in this room until you die, and you've got a beanbag and food, and we can develop ideas, that's church to me. That's the end game. I've sat in plenty of writers' rooms. I've done it. That's church to me. I happily live there. But if you said to me, you're going to sell a film, I'd kill myself. But that you had to train the weakness. If I was a writer that wanted to get stuff made, I had to go learn the producing side of it. And then now, since then, it's been nothing but fucking roses. It's been really good. Yeah, it's
Fantastic.
been very, very
That was a
fun.
great thing to end on, I think, Darren.
I think so as well. So,
Boys, thanks for having me.
thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
joining the
coming.
show.
It's
Yeah.
been great.
And I think that we don't need to worry about filming the ending.
No
And I
wrap
think
up? I love my wrap up.
Yeah, that's okay. We can
What are
do
you
the wrap
selling?
up
Is it
after
Blue
that.
Chew?
No.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve.
No problem.
thank
Thank you so much for coming. That is the end of the episode. Let us know what you think about the conversation in the comment section below, and smash that like button.
Ring the bell and subscribe as well, and you better be back next time.
And we will see you in the next episode.